The blood hit the marble before the silence did. Queen Nyra Vale stood trembling in the moon-throne hall while 1,000 nobles watched her alpha king reject her publicly, tearing their mate bond apart like shattered glass. Born half-human in a kingdom that worshipped dominance, she was exiled to die in the Frostfang Wastes. But exile didn't kill her. It awakened something far more dangerous. This is the story of a rejected queen who rose from betrayal to force an empire to its knees. If you want to see how a woman discarded as weak became powerful enough to destroy the king who abandoned her, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know where my tribe is watching from. The court assembled at dawn beneath silver torches that cast dancing shadows across pillars carved with the names of dead kings. Nyra felt every eye tracking her movement through the throne room like predators watching wounded prey stumble past. Her ceremonial gown dragged across black marble polished to mirror finish, reflecting a distorted version of herself she barely recognized anymore. 3 months married to an alpha king. 3 months of sleeping beside a man who barely looked at her. 3 months of court nobles whispering just loud enough for her to hear that the bloodline was contaminated now. That House Drakkar had fallen by bonding with human filth. The fabric of her dress weighed more than armor. Silver threads woven through midnight blue silk that cost more than her father's entire estate before the disgrace. Before her mother ran off with a human merchant and left House Vale drowning in shame. Before Nyra became the bargaining chip that saved her family from complete extinction. She reached the center of the chamber and stopped before the moon throne where Vylor sat carved from stone and starlight. His silver eyes swept over her without recognition, without warmth, without anything resembling the mate bond that burned beneath her collarbone every waking moment. The court chancellor stepped forward, ancient face creased with barely concealed satisfaction. Lord Mordain had served 3 alpha kings and survived by reading power shifts like weather patterns. He smelled blood in the water today. "Your Majesty," he began, voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling that arched 12 stories above them. "The noble houses have submitted their petition regarding the status of Queen Nyra Vale." Valor's expression never changed. His face could have been carved from the same marble as the floor. "Read it." The Chancellor unrolled a scroll that probably cost more than Nyra's entire dowry. Wax seals from every major house dangled from the bottom like execution weights. The assembled lords and ladies of the Lycari Empire hereby declare Queen Nyra Vale unfit to stand beside the Alpha King. Her human ancestry weakens the royal bloodline. Her presence invites rebellion from territories that demand pure Lycari leadership. For the stability of the empire and the strength of the throne, we request her immediate removal from the royal household. Silence pressed against Nyra's eardrums like deep water. She wanted to scream that she never asked for this, never wanted to be queen, never chose the mate bond that fate forced between them. Her father sold her to save House Vale from extinction after her mother's disgrace. She was 14 when the betrothal was signed, a child playing with dolls when old men decided her future over wine and treaties. 17 when Valor's wolf recognized her as mate during the coronation ceremony. She remembered that moment with crystalline clarity. The way his eyes had snapped to her across the Grand Cathedral. The way every Lycari in attendance had felt the bond snap into place like lightning striking the same spot twice. Impossible. Undeniable. The Alpha King had found his fated mate. The Empire had celebrated for 3 days straight. Nobody asked if Nyra wanted to be fate's choice. 20. When she realized being chosen by destiny meant absolutely nothing if the man attached to that destiny refused to choose her back. Valor rose from the throne. The court held its breath. 7 feet of Alpha King descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate as an execution march. Muscles moved beneath the formal black uniform decorated with silver insignias of rank and bloodline. He was beautiful the way winter storms were beautiful, devastating and cold and utterly indifferent to the damage left behind. When he reached her, Nyra forced herself to meet his gaze, searching for something, anything. Some flicker of the man who'd whispered her name on their wedding night like a prayer he didn't want answered. She found nothing but calculation. "You are unfit to stand beside me." His voice cut through her chest like a blade between ribs. The mate bond exploded in agony. Nyra gasped, stumbling backward as invisible claws tore through her sternum. Rejection from a bonded mate was supposed to be impossible. The wolf inside an Alpha King would never allow it. The pain would destroy them both, drive them mad, kill them slowly from the inside as their souls tried to separate from something fate had welded together. Unless the king was strong enough to survive it. Unless he decided the throne mattered more than the woman fate gave him. Unless he was willing to bleed internally for the rest of his life if it meant keeping his crown. Nyra's knees hit marble hard enough to crack bone. Blood from a bitten tongue filled her mouth, copper and salt. The throne room spun. She couldn't breathe past the sensation of her soul being ripped in half. Somewhere distant, she heard gasps from the assembled nobles. Shock, horror, satisfaction. Mostly satisfaction. She looked up through tears she refused to let fall and saw something flicker across Valor's face. Too quick to name, gone before she could grasp it. For half a heartbeat, he looked like a man being executed alongside her. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Please," she whispered. The word tasted like ashes, like every pathetic moment of her life condensed into a single syllable. She hated herself for begging, hated the weakness flooding her voice, but the bond was shredding inside her chest, and she couldn't think past the pain. Valor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he turned away from her, faced the assembled court instead. "The noble houses are correct," he announced. His voice carried through the throne room with the weight of absolute authority. "My queen has failed to earn the respect of the empire. She brings weakness to the throne at a time when we face rebellion from the southern territories and challenges from rival alpha clans. Her human blood contaminates the royal lineage. Effective immediately, Nyra Vale is stripped of her title, removed from the royal bloodline, and cast out from this court." The chamber erupted. Some nobles looked genuinely shocked. Lady Seraphine of House Moonwhisper actually had tears in her eyes. Lord Theron appeared uncomfortable, his gray beard twitching with disapproval. But most of the court looked triumphant. Years of resentment and prejudice finally validated by the king himself. Because this was what they wanted all along. A pure-blooded queen. Not this half-human mistake who reminded them that Alpha Kings could be bound by fate they didn't choose. Nyra tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't cooperate. The bond kept tearing, kept pulling, kept screaming through every nerve that this was wrong, that mates didn't abandon each other, that kings didn't destroy the one person fate chose specifically for them. But Valor had been raised inside a palace where survival meant sacrifice, where power demanded ruthlessness, where his own father executed 3 brothers to secure the throne, where showing mercy got you killed by the next ambitious alpha waiting for weakness to exploit. He learned early that crowns required blood payment, that kings who wanted to keep their heads needed to prove they valued power over everything else, even over the woman their soul recognized as home. Tonight, Nyra was the price for his crown. Lord Theron of House Blackfang stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable, but following protocol. "Your Majesty, what shall be done with the former queen?" The words hit like physical blows. Former queen. 3 months ago, she was promised forever. Now she was former. Past tense. Discarded. Valor's hands clenched at his sides. The only tell that this was costing him anything at all. Exile her beyond the Frostfang Wastes. Let the wilderness decide her fate. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even in a cruel court built on dominance and survival, exile to Frostfang was considered a death sentence. The territory was lawless, frozen year-round, inhabited by rogues, failed warriors, and monsters that even Lycari hunters avoided. The cold alone killed most people within 48 hours. Add in the predators and the complete lack of shelter or resources, and nobody survived there longer than a few days. Sending Nyra there was execution with extra steps. Murder disguised as mercy. The Chancellor bowed low. "It will be done immediately, Your Majesty." Guards materialized from the shadows like they'd been waiting for this moment. Probably had been. Nothing happened in the Moonthorn Palace without extensive planning. Nyra felt rough hands grip her arms, hauling her upright. Her legs barely supported her weight. The bond continued tearing, a constant agony that made thinking almost impossible. She wanted to fight. Wanted to scream. Wanted to unleash whatever pathetic remnant of power her half-human bloodline possessed, and make them all hurt the way she was hurting. But she was so tired. Tired of fighting for acceptance from people who despised her. Tired of loving a man who looked at her like a problem to solve instead of a mate to cherish. tired of being weak in a world that worships strength above everything else. The guards dragged her toward the exit. Her feet scraped across marble. Nobles stepped aside to avoid being touched by her, like weakness was contagious, like her human blood would contaminate them through proximity. Nyra looked back once. Just once, catching Valor's silver eyes across the throne room. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something crack in his expression. Thought she saw regret buried beneath the cold calculation. Thought she saw a man being torn apart by the choice he just made. Then he turned away, dismissed her like she was nothing, like 3 months of marriage meant nothing, like the mate bond screaming between them meant nothing. The throne room doors slammed shut behind her with the finality of a tomb ceiling, and Nyra felt something fundamental break inside her chest. Not just the bond, something deeper. The part of her that believed in destiny, in fate, in the idea that being chosen by the universe meant something. All of it shattered, leaving behind something raw and bleeding and absolutely done with begging. But they threw her beyond the Empire's borders before sunrise. No supplies, no weapons, no food or water, nothing except the ceremonial gown she wore and a thin cloak that wouldn't last a single night in Frostfang's brutal cold. The royal guard shoved her past the final watchtower into snow that reached her knees, then rode back toward civilization without a backward glance. One of them spat in the snow before leaving. Nyra stood alone beneath a sky turning gray with approaching dawn. The wind bit through her gown like teeth through paper. Her mating mark still burned against her collarbone, a constant reminder of the bond Valor tried to sever. Except it wouldn't die. Couldn't die completely. The connection between them had weakened to a whisper, a ghost of what it was. But it remained. A thread of agony connecting her heart to the man who destroyed her. She looked back at the Empire one final time, towers and walls and civilization disappearing into morning mist. Somewhere beyond that horizon, Valor was probably already forgetting her. Moving on, securing his throne with the sacrifice of a woman nobody wanted anyway. Good, she thought with venom she didn't know she possessed. I hope your crown keeps you warm at night. Then she turned north and started walking. Not because she had a plan, not because she believed in survival. She walked because standing still meant freezing to death, and some stubborn animal part of her brain refused to give Valor that satisfaction, refused to let him win by dying quietly like the Empire expected. If she was going to die, she would die fighting, even if the only enemy was the cold. Hours blurred together, snow fell harder, thick flakes that erased her footprints within minutes. The temperature dropped as the sun climbed higher, some cruel joke of Frostfang weather patterns. Nyra's teeth chattered so hard she bit her tongue, blood mixed with saliva, freezing on her lips. Her thoughts fragmented into strange clarity that came with hypothermia. She remembered her mother's face before the disgrace. Beautiful, defiant, choosing love over duty and destroying her family in the process. Nyra used to resent her for that choice. Used to think her mother was selfish for following her heart instead of protecting her daughter. Now she understood. Love made people stupid, made them believe in things like happy endings and destiny, made them vulnerable. She remembered her father's expression when he told her she would marry the Alpha King, relief mixed with guilt. He was selling his daughter to save his house, and they both knew it. But what choice did he have? House Vale was drowning in debt and shame. The betrothal to the crown prince was a lifeline. Nyra didn't blame him. She blamed herself for being naive enough to believe marriage to an Alpha King could be anything except a transaction. She remembered Valor's voice on their wedding night. This changes nothing between us. Cold, factual, establishing boundaries before she could entertain fantasies. He was right about that, at least. Nothing changed because there was nothing there to begin with. Just a bond neither of them wanted and a crown that demanded sacrifice. The cold stopped hurting after a while. That was bad. Nyra knew that was bad. Her survival training before the wedding had covered hypothermia. The instructor said losing sensation was the beginning of the end. When you stopped shivering, you had maybe an hour before organs started shutting down. She kept walking anyway. What else was there to do? Lie down and die? Give Valor the satisfaction of killing her without getting his hands dirty? No. If she was going to die, she would drag herself as far from the Empire as possible. Make them work for it. Make the wilderness her grave instead of royal decree. Petty revenge. But it was all she had left. Nyra collapsed sometime after dark. Didn't remember falling, just found herself face down in snow that tasted like metal and ash. Her body stopped shivering entirely now. Dangerous numbness spread from her toes to her chest. She tried to move. Nothing responded. Her muscles had given up. Good, she thought distantly. Let it end. Let the cold finish what Valor started. Let the Empire forget she ever existed. The bond pulsed once, weak, desperate. Valor feeling her dying 300 miles away. Nyra hoped it hurt him, hoped it tore through his chest the way rejection tore through hers, hoped he spent the rest of his life feeling this exact moment on repeat. Then the wolves came. Not like Kari. She could tell by the sound. Regular wolves moved with pack coordination. These were rogues, outcasts from various packs who'd gone feral in the wastes. She heard them circling through the storm, growling low and hungry. Probably smelled blood and weakness, easy prey. Nyra tried to push herself up. Her arms collapsed. She managed to roll onto her back, staring up at storm clouds that blocked the moon. 5 wolves surrounded her, eyes reflecting what little light penetrated the darkness. The largest one padded closer, breath steaming in the frozen air, lips pulled back from fangs designed to tear through flesh and bone. This was it, eaten alive by rogues, somehow fitting. The weak always got devoured in the end. But instead of fear, Nyra felt something else rising in her chest. Rage, pure, incandescent, absolute. She was done being prey, done being weak, done being the victim everyone expected her to be. The wolf lunged. Something inside Nyra's chest exploded outward. Not power, not magic, nothing she recognized or understood. It felt like her soul cracking open and bleeding light that wasn't light. Energy that wasn't energy, something fundamental and wrong and ancient. The wolf froze mid-leap, actually froze. Suspended in air like time had stopped. Its eyes went wide with primal terror, the kind of fear that lived deeper than thought, deeper than instinct, the fear that convinced prey animals to chew off their own legs to escape traps. Then it started screaming. Wolves don't scream like humans, but this one did. High, agonized, mindless. The sound carved through the storm like a blade through silk. The other rogues scattered immediately, fleeing into darkness while their pack leader convulsed in the snow. Foam poured from its jaws. Its legs spasmed. It kept screaming and screaming and screaming. Nyra watched, too shocked to move. The power pouring from her chest was responding to something older than conscious thought. Ancient instinct coded into her bloodline. She could feel what the wolf was feeling, the terror consuming it from within. Fear that fed on itself, that grew exponentially, that invaded every corner of its mind until nothing else existed. Just terror, pure, endless, devouring. Fear, a voice whispered through her fractured mind. You taste their fear and feed it back until it devours them. The wolf finally stopped screaming, stopped moving, stopped breathing. Its heart had simply given out. Destroyed by terror too intense for a living thing to survive. Nyra stared at the corpse, then at her hands shaking with residual energy that felt nothing like the Likari strength she'd seen her entire life. This was different, invasive, wrong in ways that made her skin crawl. What the hell was that? The voice didn't answer, but something fundamental shifted inside her, like a door unlocking in a house she'd lived in her whole life without knowing that room existed. Power flooded through channels that had been sealed since birth. Ancient, terrifying, absolutely beyond her control. Nyra pushed herself to her knees, then to her feet. The cold no longer bothered her. The exhaustion evaporated. Every sense sharpened to painful clarity. She could smell the fear scent the fleeing wolves left behind, could hear their heartbeats fading into the distance, could taste the psychic residue of the dead wolf's final moments. She felt awake for the first time in years. Awake, powerful, and absolutely terrified of what was waking up inside her. Because this wasn't like Kari's strength. This was something else entirely. Something the Empire would kill to possess, or kill to erase. Nyra looked down at her hands glowing faintly with silver light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. The mating mark on her collarbone burned brighter, responding to the power flooding her system. She started laughing. The sound was broken, unhinged, echoing through the frozen wasteland. They wanted to kill her by throwing her into the wilderness. Instead, they just unleashed something that should have stayed buried. The next 3 weeks nearly destroyed her sanity. Nyra survived by instinct and accident. She found a cave system abandoned by hibernating bears, driven out by whatever psychic pressure leaked from her presence. The walls were covered in ice formations that refracted moonlight into patterns that looked almost like writing, almost like warnings. She killed her first rabbit using that strange invasive power, made it freeze in terror while she broke its neck with shaking hands. The guilt almost destroyed her, feeling the rabbit's fear as if it was her own, experiencing its final moments of panic and confusion. But she was hungry. And the dead didn't judge survival. Nyra learned to start fires by watching storm lightning split dead trees, learned which plants were edible by testing them on rats first, flooding their minds with manufactured calm so they would eat without fear, learned to hunt by turning predator instincts against themselves. Every kill left her shaking. Every use of the power felt like drowning, but she got stronger. The cave became home. She marked days by carving lines into stone with a sharp rock, kept her mind occupied by practicing control over the power that wanted to consume her. Some days it felt like wrestling a wild animal inside her chest. Other days it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Those were the days that scared her most. Because using the power shouldn't feel natural, shouldn't feel right, shouldn't feel like finally becoming who she was always meant to be. The visions started on the 7th night. Dead women appeared in her dreams, silver markings carved into their skin. Ancient queens who moved through her mind like ghosts searching for something lost. They whispered truths that made no sense, called her Moonborn, said her mother's bloodline carried something the Lycari had spent centuries trying to erase. A gift that let them rule predators by breaking the predator mind from within. "You are not weak," the dead queens whispered. "You are the nightmare that makes nightmares kneel." Nyra woke screaming most mornings, because the visions felt too real, too detailed. She remembered lives she never lived, remembered wars fought before the Lycari Empire existed, remembered the last Moonborn queen being hunted down and executed by an alliance of alpha clans terrified of her power. Remembered why the bloodline was buried, because rulers fear any power they cannot control. And Moonborn couldn't be controlled, only killed. On the 19th day of exile, Nyra killed her first rogue Lycan. He ambushed her near a frozen river where she was washing blood from a recent kill. Bigger than any wolf, stronger than most warriors. Scars covered his body like a roadmap of violence survived. He smiled when he saw her, clearly expecting easy prey. Fresh meat was rare in Frostfang, female meat even rarer. "You lost, little girl?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. Nyra slowly stood, water dripping from her hands. Not lost, just found. He laughed, confident, cruel. "Oh, this is going to be fun." He lunged. Nyra unleashed the power. Not carefully, not controlled. Everything she'd been holding back for 3 weeks exploded outward in a psychic shockwave that slammed into the rogue's mind like a battering ram. His wolf instincts, designed to make him a perfect predator, turned against him instantly. Terror flooded his system, not manufactured, real. His own deepest fears amplified 1,000 times. Whatever traumatic memories he'd buried came screaming to the surface. Nyra felt all of it, saw through his eyes as his mind fractured, felt him die from the inside. The rogue lasted 40 seconds. Then he tore his own throat out trying to escape the terror consuming him. Nyra vomited in the snow afterward, shaking, covered in blood that wasn't hers. The dead queens whispered approval through her fractured thoughts, said she was finally understanding, finally becoming what she was always meant to be. A weapon disguised as weakness. But weapons didn't feel guilt, didn't shake, didn't cry over the monsters they killed. Nyra spent that night curled in her cave, arms wrapped around knees, staring at hands that had just killed a man without touching him. The power hummed beneath her skin, eager, hungry, wanting more. That was the moment she understood. This power would destroy her if she let it, or she could learn to wield it, control it, become something the Empire would regret ever discarding. That night, she made a decision. If the Empire wanted her gone, she would disappear. But she would return strong enough that they regretted ever teaching her what survival required. Strong enough to make Valor look her in the eyes and see exactly what his crown cost him. Tutset. 4 months after her exile, Nyra walked into a rogue settlement called Ironmaw. The outpost existed in permanent twilight between Empire jurisdiction and pure wilderness. Criminals, deserters, and failed warriors gathered there to drink, fight, and die slowly. Buildings were constructed from scavenged materials and desperation. Smoke from cooking fires mixed with the ever-present snow to create a gray haze that smelled like ash and old blood. Most rogues avoided her instinctively, even if they didn't recognize what she was. They just knew something about her felt predator wrong. Nyra had spent a week watching the settlement from the hills, learning patterns, identifying leadership. Ironmaw was controlled by a former alpha named Kale Ashbourne, who'd been exiled 20 years ago for challenging his king and losing. He ruled through pure violence and the kind of brutal pragmatism that came from surviving where civilized men died. Exactly the kind of man she needed. She walked into the largest tavern at sunset. Conversations died. 50 pairs of eyes tracked her movement to the bar. She could smell violence in the air like ozone before lightning. These men and women survived by reading weakness, looking for easy targets, prey. They saw a thin girl barely past 20 wearing furs she'd stitched together from her kills. Ruined boots held together with wire. Silver hair that marked her as nobility despite the months of hard living. Easy prey. They didn't see the power coiled beneath her skin like a sleeping serpent. The bartender sneered at her. Broken teeth, scarred knuckles, face like a clenched fist. "We don't serve Empire trash." Nyra met his eyes without blinking. "I'm not asking for service. I'm asking who runs this place." A man built like a siege weapon rose from a corner table. Kale Ashbourne. Scars covered his face and arms like a map of violence survived. One eye was milky white from an old wound. His presence filled the room like pressure before an explosion. This was a man who'd killed hundreds, who'd ruled through fear before exile, who survived 20 years in Frostfang when most died in 20 days. His voice rumbled like grinding stone. "I run Ironmaw, and you got about 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't let my boys tear you apart for entertainment." The room tensed, hands moved toward weapons. Men shifted position for better attack angles. This was how they entertained themselves. Fresh blood, fresh screams, fresh meat. Nyra smiled. It was not a kind expression. "Because I'm the woman your alpha king threw away," she said clearly, "and I'm looking for everyone else he discarded." The tavern went absolutely silent. Kyle studied her with his one good eye. Years of survival had taught him to read people like most men read weather. He saw something in her expression that made his hand pause halfway to his blade. "Holy shit," he said slowly. "You're the rejected queen." "Former queen," Nyra corrected. "Now I'm just someone who learned what this empire really values, which is strength." She let power leak from her control just slightly, just enough that every predator instinct in the room screamed danger. "And I'm here to show you what strength looks like when it stops begging for acceptance." 3 rogues lunged at her simultaneously, young, stupid, eager to prove themselves. Nyra didn't move. The power exploded outward in a psychic shockwave that slammed into every mind within 20 feet. The 3 attackers collapsed mid-stride, convulsing as their worst nightmares consumed them alive. The rest of the tavern scrambled backward, crashing into tables and chairs in their desperation to escape the terror flooding their heads. Grown men whimpered, warriors pissed themselves, killers begged for mercy. Only Kyle remained standing, barely. His knees shook. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold, but he held her gaze with the stubborn defiance of someone who'd survived worse. His wolf snarled inside his chest, torn between submission and rage. "What the hell are you?" he managed through gritted teeth. Nyra pulled the power back slowly. "Let them breathe again. Let them remember what drowning in fear felt like." "I'm what the Lycari kings spent centuries trying to erase," she said quietly. "I'm Moonborn, and I'm building an army from everyone the Empire threw away as worthless." The tavern stayed silent except for ragged breathing and the crackle of the fireplace. Kale slowly straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. Rolled his shoulders like a fighter recovering from a knockout punch. An army to do what exactly? Nyra's smile sharpened into something that would haunt nightmares. "Remind King Valor Drakkar that mercy is weakness," she said, "and queens who survive exile learn to become far more dangerous than the kings who abandoned them." Kael stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. It was rough, half mad. The sound of a man recognizing beautiful catastrophe when it walked through his door. "All right, Ghost Queen," he said finally. "You want an army? I'll get you an army. But when we march on that bastard's palace, I get first blood on the nobles who exiled me. Deal." They shook on it while the tavern watched in stunned silence. And in that moment, something shifted. Not just in Ironmaw. Across every forgotten corner of the Empire where discarded warriors and rejected souls gathered. Word spread like wildfire through the underground. The rejected queen survived. She wasn't dead. She was building something, and she was coming back. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in the Moon-Throne Palace, King Vaelor Drakkar woke from another nightmare drenched in sweat that smelled like fear and regret. The mate bond pulsed, stronger than yesterday, stronger than last week, growing instead of fading the way it should after rejection. His wolf snarled inside his chest, furious at the human half that destroyed their mate. Vaelor pressed a hand against his sternum where the bond burned like an infected wound that refused to heal. 4 months since exile. 4 months of feeling Nyra's suffering through the connection he couldn't sever. Feeling her terror, her pain, her rage, and recently something worse, her power. Vaelor rose from bed and walked to the balcony overlooking his fractured empire. Dawn was still an hour away. The city sprawled below him, dark except for scattered fires that marked where riots had broken out the previous night. 3 southern territories in open rebellion, trade routes blocked by bandits, noble houses scheming against each other while the throne weakened. Everything was falling apart exactly like the council promised wouldn't happen if he just removed the weak queen. They lied. Or maybe they told the truth, and he was fool enough to believe that sacrifice would save anything. The bond pulsed again. Not weak anymore. Not dying. Strong. Getting stronger every day. Vaelor gripped the balcony railing hard enough that stone cracked beneath his fingers. He'd felt it happening. Felt Nyra's transformation through the connection that wouldn't die. At first it was just survival, basic animal instinct to live. Then it became something else. Power awakening. Ancient. Terrifying. Moonborn. The word whispered through his mind like a curse. He'd read the histories. Every Alpha King studied them. The Moonborn bloodline was supposedly extinct, wiped out 3 centuries ago when the Lykari clans united specifically to hunt them down. Because Moonborn couldn't be ruled, couldn't be controlled, they invaded minds, broke wills, turned predators into prey. And Nyra was one of them. He'd exiled the one woman capable of destroying everything. "Your Majesty?" Vaelor turned. His head advisor Marcus stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable. The man was 60 years old and had served since Vaelor's father ruled. He knew when to speak and when to stay silent. Tonight he chose poorly. "What is it?" Vaelor's voice came out rougher than intended. Marcus hesitated. "We've received troubling reports from the Frostfang territories." "She's dead," Vaelor said flatly. "We've been through this." "That's the thing, Your Majesty. She's not dead. Multiple sources confirm a woman matching the former queen's description is gathering rogues in Ironmaw. They're calling her the Ghost Queen." Something cold slithered down Vaelor's spine. "Impossible. The reports are quite specific, sire. Silver hair, Moonborn abilities, and she's apparently building an army from exiled warriors and criminals. The rogues are rallying to her, following her. They say she survived Frostfang when seasoned warriors die there within weeks." Vaelor's hands gripped the railing hard enough to draw blood from his palms. The bond pulsed again, stronger, closer. Not just alive, thriving. He'd felt it but refused to believe it. Refused to imagine that Nyra could survive Frostfang when it was designed to be unsurvivable. But the bond didn't lie. She was alive, growing powerful, becoming something that made his wolf pace inside his chest with a mixture of pride and absolute terror. "What do you recommend, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked carefully. Vaelor closed his eyes, felt the bond stretching between them like a chain connecting his heart to the woman he destroyed. "Send scouts," he said quietly. "I need to know what she's become. And if the reports are true, if she's truly gathering an army." Vaelor opened his eyes and stared at the burning city on the horizon. "Then we prepare for war," he said. Because I taught her the first law of kings. Mercy is weakness, and queens who survive exile learn to become the monsters that mercy created. Marcus bowed and left quickly. Valor stood alone on the balcony while dawn broke over his crumbling empire. The mate bond pulsed one more time. Stronger, closer, coming for him. And somewhere in the wasteland he'd thrown her into, Nyra felt that same pulse and smiled. Because war was coming, and this time she wouldn't be the one kneeling. The scout returned to the Moon-Throne Palace 7 days later, missing an eye and most of his sanity. Valor stood in the war room surrounded by maps and advisors, while the man knelt on blood-stained marble, trembling so violently his armor rattled. Captain of the King's Guard for 15 years, veteran of 3 border wars, a wolf strong enough to tear through enemy lines without breaking stride, reduced to this. Report, Valor commanded. The scout's remaining eye was wide and glassy, fixed on something nobody else could see. She's real, Your Majesty, the Ghost Queen. I saw her. We all saw her. Lord Theron leaned forward, gray beard twitching with concern. What happened to your unit? Dead. The scout's voice cracked. All of them. She didn't even touch us, just looked at us and we started tearing each other apart. I watched Gregor eat his own blade, watched Marcus claw his eyes out, watched them all die screaming while she stood there like death itself. Silence crushed the war room. Marcus the advisor cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, this confirms our worst fears. The Moonborn abilities are active, growing stronger. If she truly commands an army of rogues— How many? Valor interrupted. How many follow her? The scout laughed. Hi. Broken. The sound of a mind shattering in real time. Hundreds already, Your Majesty. Maybe thousands. Every exile, every criminal, every warrior the Empire discarded. They're rallying to her like she's salvation itself. They worship her, call her the queen who survived, the woman strong enough to rise after being thrown away. Valor's hands gripped the edge of the war table hard enough to splinter wood. The mate bond pulsed in his chest. Constant now. A heartbeat layered over his own, growing stronger every hour like a second pulse counting down to his execution. She's coming here, the scout whispered. I heard her say it. Heard her promise her army that they would march on the capital, that she would make the Alpha King kneel before the woman he rejected. Valor's wolf snarled inside his chest. Not from anger, from recognition, because some primal part of him was thrilled by the idea, by the image of Nyra powerful enough to make him submit. That was the sickness the mate bond created. Even broken, it pulled them together. Get him out, Valor said quietly. Guards hauled the broken scout from the room. His laughter echoed down hallways built to withstand sieges, but not madness. The sound faded slowly, replaced by tense silence. The advisors erupted into argument immediately. Lord Theron demanded they fortify the borders, pull back the southern legions, turn the capital into a fortress. Lady Seraphine suggested negotiation. Perhaps if they offered clemency, recognition, some symbolic gesture. Lord Mordain, the Chancellor, argued for a preemptive strike. Send the full army into Frostfang, burn Ironmaw to ash, kill the Ghost Queen before she became unstoppable. Valor listened to none of it, because he was feeling something through the mate bond that terrified him more than any army. Anticipation. Nyra was enjoying this. The girl who used to flinch when nobles raised their voices was gone. In her place was something that savored the fear spreading through his empire like poison through veins. The advisors were still arguing when he finally spoke. Leave me. Your Majesty, we need to decide on a course of action, Marcus protested. I said leave. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind of command that made wolves submit on instinct, made them bare their throats. The war room emptied quickly. Chairs scraped, boots retreated. Only Marcus lingered near the door, expression troubled in the way old men got when they saw disaster approaching. Sire, if I may— How long until she reaches the capital? Valor asked without looking at him. Marcus hesitated. The pause spoke volumes. At her current pace, perhaps 3 weeks. Maybe less if more rogues join her march. And they will join her, Your Majesty. Every report confirms it. The Ghost Queen is becoming legend. Every exile in the Empire is hearing her story and deciding she's their salvation. 3 weeks. 21 days until the woman he destroyed came back strong enough to return the favor. Valor walked to the window overlooking the training yards where soldiers drilled in formation. The Empire's finest warriors, alpha-blooded, battle-tested, loyal unto death. He watched them move through combat sequences, perfect precision, decades of training distilled into muscle memory. Would they be enough against a woman who could invade their minds and turn their own instincts against them? The answer was obvious. No. Marcus, he said quietly, tell me the truth. Can we win? The old advisor was silent for a long moment, long enough that Valor knew the answer before he spoke. Against a conventional army? Yes. Against a Moonborn who grows stronger every day while our forces fracture from internal rebellion? I don't know, Your Majesty. Nobody has fought a Moonborn in 3 centuries. The old texts say they were eradicated precisely because they couldn't be defeated conventionally. Valor closed his eyes. The bond pulsed again, not with pain this time, with something that felt almost like vindication, like Nyra sending a message through the connection. See what you created? See what your crown cost you? Then we prepare for war anyway, he said. Fortify the capital, recall the southern legions, send word to every allied house that the Alpha King demands their loyalty. And if they refuse, then we'll know who sides with the Ghost Queen before she even arrives. Marcus bowed and left quietly. Valor stood alone in the war room staring at maps that showed his empire fracturing like ice beneath spring thaw. Rebellion in the south, trade routes severed, noble houses scheming, and now an army of exiles led by the woman fate chose as his mate marching toward his throne. Everything he sacrificed Nyra to protect was collapsing anyway. The irony was almost beautiful, almost funny, except Valor had forgotten how to laugh months ago. He pressed a hand against his chest where the bond burned like a brand. 4 months of feeling her pain. 4 months of regretting a choice he couldn't unmake. 4 months of wondering if mercy would have been less costly than the sacrifice. 4 months of his wolf raging inside his chest, furious at the human half that destroyed their mate, because wolves mated for life. Rejection violated something fundamental in their nature, made them unstable, violent, unpredictable. Valor could feel himself changing, growing more aggressive, less controlled. His advisors had started flinching when he entered rooms. Guards avoided his gaze. Even Marcus walked carefully around him now. The Alpha King was becoming the beast everyone feared, and Nyra was the only person who could have stopped it. Now she was coming to finish what his rejection started. He walked to the private chambers he once shared with her. Nobody had entered since her exile. He'd forbidden it. The servants whispered that the king visited every night, stood in the darkness staring at nothing, talking to ghosts. They weren't wrong. The room remained exactly as she left it, gowns in the wardrobe still smelling faintly of lavender, books on the nightstand with corners folded on pages she never finished. Her scent fading, but not gone, like a memory refusing to die. Valor picked up a hairbrush from the vanity, silver strands still tangled in the bristles. He'd kept it there, forbidden anyone from cleaning it, some pathetic part of him clinging to physical evidence that she'd existed, that their marriage had been real even if he'd treated it like obligation. He told himself the rejection was necessary, that sacrificing one woman to save an empire was the right choice. The kings couldn't afford to value love over duty, that showing weakness would destroy him faster than any rebellion. But standing in this empty room, feeling Nyra's presence through the corrupted bond, Valor finally admitted the truth he'd been avoiding. He was terrified, not of her power, not of her army, of the moment when she would stand before him again and he would have to face what his choice created. The door opened behind him. Valor spun, hand on his blade. Instinct, paranoia, the constant awareness that assassination attempts had tripled since Nyra's exile. Lady Seraphine stood in the doorway, the only noble who'd shown genuine sadness at Nyra's exile. She was old, wise, dangerous in the way people who survived court politics for 60 years were dangerous. She knew where every body was buried because she'd helped dig half the graves. "You shouldn't be here," Valor said. "Neither should you, Your Majesty." Seraphine entered slowly, leaning on a cane carved from ironwood. "This room should be sealed, forgotten, a monument to mistakes. Yet you return here every night like a pilgrim seeking penance." Valor said nothing. What was there to say? Seraphine walked to the window overlooking the gardens where Nyra used to spend mornings reading. The glass was dirty now. Nobody maintained these rooms. She loved this view, the old woman said softly. Used to sit here for hours with books she never actually read. I asked her once what she was thinking about. Do you know what she said? What? Nothing. Seraphine turned to face him. She said she was thinking about nothing, about the blissful emptiness of not having to prove herself worthy every moment of every day. That's what she wanted, Your Majesty, not power, not recognition, just the freedom to exist without justifying her existence. Valor's chest tightened. The words hit like accusations. I didn't know her, he admitted quietly. 3 months married, and I never once asked what she wanted, what she needed, what made her happy. I treated her like a political problem instead of a person. You treated her like every alpha king treats their mate, Seraphine corrected. Like property. Like duty. Like something to possess but never truly see. Your father did the same to your mother. His father before him. It's tradition in this palace. Marry for power. Ignore for survival. I rejected her to save the empire, Valor said. The rebellion is worse now than before, Seraphine interrupted sharply. The southern territories burn brighter. Allied houses scheme harder against you. Your own guards whisper that the king has gone mad with regret. Tell me, Your Majesty, what exactly did your sacrifice save? The words hit like physical blows, each one landing perfectly, each one true. Valor turned away. What do you want, Seraphine? To offer you a truth you already know but refuse to accept, the old woman said. When the Ghost Queen reaches the capital, you will have one chance. One moment to make a different choice than the one that destroyed you both. And what choice is that? Seraphine smiled sadly. That's the tragedy, isn't it? I can't tell you, because the right choice 4 months ago isn't the right choice now. The woman you rejected died in Frostfang. What's coming back is something else entirely. Something forged in exile and pain and absolute betrayal. Then what am I supposed to do? Survive, Seraphine said simply, and hope that somewhere beneath the monster you created, the woman you rejected still exists. Hope that some part of her remembers what you could have been before you chose power over her. She left. Valor stood alone in Nyra's abandoned chambers while the mate bond burned in his chest like a wound that would never heal. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the capital, dark, ominous, like the universe itself was holding its breath. The Ghost Queen's army grew like a cancer spreading through the Empire's abandoned territories. Nyra stood on a cliff overlooking the encampment that stretched for half a mile in every direction. Fires burned against the snow, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. She'd stopped counting after the first week. Warriors sparred in makeshift training rings. Blacksmiths forged weapons from scavenged metal. Scouts returned daily with reports of more exiles joining the march. All of them following a half-human queen they barely knew. All of them willing to die for a woman who represented their collective rage. Why? Kyle asked, standing beside her with arms crossed over his scarred chest. Nyra didn't look at him. Why what? Why do they follow you? You're not the strongest, not the oldest, not even full Likari. Hell, half of them could probably kill you in a straight fight. So why? Because I survived what should have killed me, Nyra said simply. Because I represent everyone the Empire threw away. Every reject, every failure, every soul deemed too weak to matter. I'm proof that survival creates something more dangerous than power ever could. Kyle grunted. Pretty speech. But that's not the real reason. Nyra finally looked at him. Then what is? Because you terrify them, Kyle said bluntly. Because they'd rather follow the monster than become its prey. Don't fool yourself, girl. This isn't loyalty. It's survival instinct. They follow you because refusing means you might turn that mind-breaking power on them instead. The word should have hurt, should have felt like accusation. Instead, Nyra smiled. Good, she said. Fear is more reliable than love anyway. Love makes people weak, makes them vulnerable, makes them believe in things like destiny and happy endings. Fear keeps them honest. Kale studied her with his one good eye. The other was milky white from an old wound, blind but somehow more perceptive than the working one. You've changed since Ironmaw. Colder, harder, more like the monsters who rule the Empire than the girl who got thrown away. I stopped pretending weakness was nobility, Nyra said. Stopped believing that being gentle made me good. The Empire worships strength? Fine. I'll show them strength that makes their Alpha King look like a child playing at power. And when you reach the capital, when you stand before Valor again, Nyra's expression went flat, unreadable, empty in the way frozen lakes were empty. Then he learns what it feels like to be powerless, to have someone you trusted destroy you for political convenience, to feel your soul tear in half while everyone watches and does nothing. You gonna kill him? The question hung in the cold air. Nyra was quiet for a long moment. The bond pulsed in her chest, constant reminder that Valor still existed, still felt everything she felt, still carried half her soul, whether either of them wanted it or not. I don't know yet, she admitted. Part of me wants to watch him bleed the way I bled, but killing him would be mercy. Quick, clean, over. I want him to live with what he did. Want him to feel regret like acid in his veins every single day. Kael whistled low. That's cold. That's justice, Nyra corrected. A scout approached, breathing hard from running. Younger than most. Eager. Still believed in glory. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Nyra turned. What kind of problem? Royal Army Patrol, 3 miles south. 50 soldiers moving to intercept us. Kael reached for his weapon immediately. I'll take a unit and... No, Nyra interrupted. Let them come. Kael stared at her. You want to let 50 trained soldiers reach our camp? I want to send a message, Nyra corrected. Tell the army to stand down. Nobody attacks unless I give the order. This is insane, Kael muttered. But he relayed the command anyway. Because that was the thing about leading through fear. People followed orders even when they thought you were crazy. Nyra walked down from the cliff toward the southern edge of camp. Her army parted automatically, creating a path. They'd learned quickly that proximity to her was dangerous when she was angry. The Moonborn power leaked from her control sometimes. Made people see things, feel things, made them experience their worst nightmares while fully awake. She reached the perimeter and waited. Alone, the army stayed back 50 yards, watching, tense, ready to fight if their queen needed them. But Nyra didn't need them. Not for this. The Royal Patrol appeared 30 minutes later. 50 soldiers in perfect formation, armor polished to mirror shine, weapons ready. They moved with the disciplined precision of men who trained together for years. Led by a captain Nyra vaguely recognized from the palace. He'd been one of the guards who laughed when she was dragged from the throne room. Memory was a funny thing. 4 months ago, she would have forgotten his face. Now she remembered every detail. The patrol stopped 50 yards away. Military distance. Safe engagement range. The captain stepped forward, face hard, professional, doing his duty. By order of King Valor Drakkar, this illegal assembly is commanded to disperse immediately. Any who refuse will be considered enemies of the Empire and destroyed accordingly. Nyra walked toward him slowly, alone, unarmed. The patrol tensed, hands moved to weapons, formations tightened, but something about her approach made them hesitate. Some instinct screaming that this was predator, not prey. That the thin woman walking toward them radiated danger in ways armor and weapons couldn't match. She stopped 10 feet from the captain. I remember you, she said quietly. You were there the night I was exiled. You stood in the hallway outside the throne room. You laughed when I begged them not to send me to Frostfang. The captain's jaw tightened. I was following orders. So were the men who threw me into the snow to die, Nyra said. So were the nobles who demanded my execution. Everyone was just following orders. Funny how that works. How cruelty becomes acceptable when you can blame someone else for commanding it. The former queen is dead, the captain said firmly. Everyone knows that. You're an imposter. A rogue using her name to gather criminals and start a war. Nyra smiled without humor. Want me to prove who I am? She let the power slip. Just a whisper. Just enough. The captain gasped, stumbling backward like he'd been punched. His soldiers cried out in unison, formation breaking as manufactured terror slammed into their minds. Not enough to kill. Not even enough to break. Just enough to remind them what helplessness felt like. To make them feel small. Powerless. Prey. Nyra pulled the power back after 5 seconds. Watched them recover. Watched recognition and horror dawn on their faces as they realized what she was. What she'd become. The captain was pale. Shaking, sweat poured down his face despite the cold. "Go back to your king," she said calmly. "Tell him the Ghost Queen sends her regards. Tell him his rejected mate survived everything he threw at her. Tell him I'm coming for the throne he valued more than the woman fate gave him. Tell him I'm 3 weeks away and getting stronger every day." The captain opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're declaring war." "No," Nyra corrected. "I'm accepting the war he started when he exiled me. When he chose his crown over his mate. When he taught me that mercy is weakness and strength is all that matters in this empire." She turned and walked back toward her camp, leaving the patrol standing in shock. Behind her, she heard the captain's voice, shaky but determined. "Brave in the way doomed men were brave. The king will destroy you. You're just one woman, one freak with unnatural power. You can't stand against the full might of the empire, against trained legions, against the Alpha King himself." Nyra stopped, looked back. Let the moonlight catch her face. "Tell me something, Captain. What do you think happens when an Alpha King rejects his fated mate to save his crown?" The captain said nothing. "I'll tell you," Nyra continued. "The mate bond doesn't die. It corrupts, grows twisted, becomes obsession instead of love, possession instead of protection. And every day Valor feels me growing stronger through that bond. He loses a little more control. Every night he feels my power building. Every moment he knows I'm coming closer." She let that sink in, then smiled. "So when you report back, make sure you mention something. The king isn't fighting an army of rogues. He's fighting the woman who still owns half his soul. The woman who knows exactly how to break him from the inside. The woman he created when he decided sacrifice was more important than the mate fate gave him." The patrol fled, broke formation and ran. Professional soldiers reduced to terrified children. Nyra watched them go while her army erupted in cheers behind her, weapons raised, voices howling victory. But she felt no triumph, only cold certainty, because she meant every word. Itat. Valor received the report 3 days later and immediately dismissed everyone from the throne room. He sat alone on the moon throne while the captain's words echoed through his skull like accusations he couldn't escape. She's coming for the throne he valued more than the woman fate gave him. The mate bond pulsed, stronger, closer, corrupted. Valor could feel her now, not just through the bond, through something deeper. Moonborn abilities worked both ways, apparently. She was in his head, not invasive, not controlling, just present. A whisper at the edge of consciousness, always there, always watching. He stood and walked to the private chambers. The room felt smaller now, suffocating, like the walls were closing in. He picked up Nyra's hairbrush again, held it like a talisman against the future bearing down on him. He told himself the rejection was necessary, that sacrificing one woman to save an empire was the right choice, that kings couldn't afford to value love over duty. But standing in this empty room, feeling Nyra's presence through the corrupted bond, Valor finally admitted the truth. He was terrified. Not of her power, not of her army, of the moment when she would stand before him again and he would have to face what his choice created, would have to look into eyes that once held hope and see nothing but hatred reflected back. The door opened. Valor didn't turn. He knew who it was, could smell the old woman's scent, lavender and dust and decades of survival. "You come here every night," Seraphine said, "torturing yourself with memories." Valor set the hairbrush down carefully. "What do you want?" "To tell you that she reached the border today," Seraphine said. "The Ghost Queen crossed into Empire territory with an army that grows larger every hour. Villages are emptying before her. Some join her march. Most just flee. The Empire is terrified, Your Majesty." "As they should be," Valor said quietly. "And you? Are you terrified?" Valor turned to face her. "Yes." The honesty seemed to surprise the old woman. She studied him with eyes that had seen 3 kings rise and fall. "What frightens you most?" "That she's right," Valor admitted. "That I destroyed the one person who could have saved me from becoming the monster this throne requires. That I chose power over everything else, and now I'm losing both." Seraphine nodded slowly. "There's wisdom in that fear. The question is whether you'll act on it." "How?" Valor demanded. "How do I face a woman I destroyed? What words exist that could possibly matter after what I did? I don't know, Seraphine said, but you have 2 weeks to figure it out. She left. Valor stood alone while storm clouds gathered outside. The bond pulsed, regular now, like a countdown to execution. 2 weeks until Nyra reached the capital. 2 weeks to find words that didn't exist. 2 weeks to prepare for the woman who owned half his soul coming to collect payment for what his crown cost her. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in 4 months, Valor didn't try to suppress the bond. He sent feeling back through the connection. Not words, just emotion, regret, pain, recognition of what he'd done, and something that might have been an apology screamed into the void. Sad. 300 miles away, Nyra gasped, stopped walking mid-stride, felt Valor's emotion flood through the bond for the first time since exile. Her army stopped behind her, confused, concerned, hands on weapons expecting attack. Kael appeared at her side immediately. What's wrong? Nyra pressed both hands against her chest where the mate bond burned like a living thing. He's reaching out. Who? Valor, she said. Through the bond. He's sending emotion. What kind of emotion? Nyra was quiet for a long moment, feeling it, examining it, looking for tricks or manipulation. Regret, she said finally. He's sending regret. Kael's expression hardened. Don't trust it. Kings lie, especially when they're losing. I know, Nyra said, but part of her wanted to. Part of her wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the Alpha King who rejected her, the man she'd started to love still existed, still felt something real. That was the cruelty of the mate bond. Even broken, it whispered promises of what could have been. She pushed the feeling away, locked it behind walls built from 4 months of survival and pain. Tell the army we march at dawn, she said. We're 2 weeks from the capital. I want to be there in 10 days. Kael nodded and left to spread the word. Nyra stood alone in the snow while the bond continued pulsing, Valor's regret flowing through it like blood through a wound. And despite everything, despite the rage and betrayal and absolute certainty that she would make him pay, a small part of her wondered, what if he meant it? What if the man who destroyed her actually regretted it? Would that change anything? Should it? Nyra didn't have answers, only knew that in 10 days she would stand before the Alpha King who rejected her, and one of them would kneel. The only question was which one. The Ghost Queen's army reached the capital gates 9 days later. Not 10. Nyra had pushed them harder than planned, forced marches through freezing nights that left weaker warriors stumbling. Minimal rest. Maximum speed. Because the bond kept pulsing with Valor's regret, and she needed to reach him before that feeling changed her mind about what came next. Before mercy started looking like weakness again. Before the rage that sustained her through 4 months of exile began cracking under the weight of emotions she'd buried in snow and survival. The capital sprawled before them like a monument to everything she'd lost. Obsidian walls rising 12 stories high. Towers carved with the names of every Alpha King who'd ruled for the past millennium. Silver banners snapping in wind that smelled like smoke and fear and the particular scent of a city preparing for siege. The gates were closed. Soldiers lined the walls, thousands of them, armor glinting in gray morning light, archers positioned at perfect intervals, siege weapons mounted on battlements. This was the Empire's full strength gathered in one place, every legion pulled from fractured territories, every allied house contributing warriors. All of it focused on the woman they'd thrown away. Kael stood beside her studying the fortifications with his one good eye. The working one tracked defensive positions with the precision of someone who'd spent decades attacking cities. They're ready for siege, full garrison, probably pulled every legion from the territories, artillery on the walls, enough supplies for months. This is going to be bloody. Nyra said nothing, just felt the bond pulsing in her chest like a second heartbeat. Valor was inside those walls, close enough that she could almost taste his presence through the corrupted connection. Close enough that her wolf wanted to howl with mixture of rage and something that felt dangerously like longing. That was the sickness the mate bond created. Even after everything, part of her still wanted him, still remembered what it felt like to sleep beside him on their wedding night, to wake up and see sunlight catching his silver hair, to believe for brief moments that maybe destiny knew what it was doing when it bound them together, that maybe being chosen by fate meant something beyond political convenience. Then reality crashed back. Hard. Unforgiving. He rejected her, exiled her, left her to die in a wasteland where even hardened warriors didn't survive. And now she was here to return the favor. "Your Majesty," Kael said quietly, "the army is waiting for orders." Nyra looked back at the forces gathered behind her. Thousands of exiles, rogues, failed warriors, criminals, every soul the Empire discarded like broken tools. They'd followed her across frozen wastelands, followed her through starvation and cold and nights when the temperature dropped low enough to kill men in their sleep. Followed her because she represented something they'd all lost. Hoped that survival meant something. That being thrown away didn't mean you were worthless. That strength could be built from the ashes of rejection. That the Empire's definition of weakness was a lie told by people who feared anyone they couldn't control. "Tell them to make camp," Nyra said. "We wait." "For what?" "For him to come to me," Nyra said. "For the Alpha King to make the first move." Kael frowned. "You think he'll just walk out here? Leave the safety of his walls?" Nyra smiled without humor. "I know he will, because the bond is driving him as crazy as it's driving me. He can feel me standing outside his walls, feel my power pressing against his city like a storm about to break. It's eating him alive." "How do you know?" "Because I feel him too," Nyra admitted. "Feel his wolf pacing inside his chest. Feel his regret like acid burning through the connection. The mate bond doesn't lie, Kael. It can't. That's its curse. And if he doesn't come, then we burn the capital to the ground," Nyra said simply. "Either way, this ends today." The army made camp within sight of the walls, close enough to be threatening, far enough to avoid archers. Fires were lit against the cold. Weapons sharpened with sounds that carried across frozen ground. Warriors prepared for battle they all knew was coming. Some of them would die. Most of them probably. But they'd chosen this moment anyway. Chosen revenge over safety. Chosen the Ghost Queen over the Empire that discarded them. Nyra walked through the camp alone, letting her presence settle over them like a blanket woven from fear and power. Moonborn energy leaked from her control in waves that made even battle-hardened rogues flinch when she passed. She'd stopped trying to hide what she was. Stopped pretending the power wasn't changing her, because it was. Every day she used it, she felt more of her humanity slipping away, replaced by something cold, predatory, ancient. The dead Moonborn queens whispered constantly now, voices in her head that sounded like her own thoughts except sharper, crueler, more certain that mercy was weakness and compassion was suicide, that survival required becoming the monster everyone already thought she was. Sometimes she wondered if they were right. If power this invasive, this absolute, could exist without corrupting the person wielding it. If you could invade minds and break wills and turn people's own instincts against them without becoming something fundamentally inhuman. The answer was probably no. But Nyra was too far gone to care. She reached the edge of camp and stared at the capital walls. Somewhere behind those stones, Veilor sat on the throne that cost him everything. Surrounded by advisors who'd demanded her exile. Protected by soldiers who'd laughed when she begged for mercy. Living with the mate bond burning in his chest every moment of every day. Good, she thought viciously. Let him suffer. Let him feel what rejection costs. Let him understand that crowns bought with sacrifice eventually demand payment in regret. The bond pulsed, strong enough to hurt. Nyra pressed a hand against her chest, felt Veilor's presence like a hook buried in her heart. Pulling. Always pulling. The mate bond didn't care about justice or revenge or the fact that he'd destroyed her. It just wanted them together. That was the cruelty of fate. It bound people together, then watched them tear each other apart. "Your Majesty." Nyra turned. A messenger stood behind her. Young, nervous, barely old enough to grow a beard, wearing the silver tabard of the Capitol Guard with a white flag clutched in shaking hands. Not one of her army, one of Veilor's. She let power leak slightly, just enough to make the air pressure drop, just enough to make the boy's survival instincts scream danger. Watched his face pale, watched sweat break out despite the cold, watched him force himself to stand steady through pure will. Brave, she thought. Stupid, but brave. "Speak," she commanded. The messenger swallowed hard. "The Alpha King requests an audience, alone, Before sunrise tomorrow. At the ruins of Blackthorn Keep. No armies, no guards, just the two of you. Nyra's expression didn't change. And if I refuse? Then the king says he'll bring his full army against yours at dawn, the messenger said. Voice shaking, but getting the words out. He says thousands will die, that the capital will burn, that blood will flood the streets until the marble runs red. But if you meet him alone, he offers to negotiate terms of surrender. Surrender, Nyra repeated slowly, tasting the word. He's offering to surrender? Those were his exact words, Your Majesty. Kale appeared from the shadows like he'd been waiting for this moment. This is a trap. Has to be. Kings don't surrender, especially not alpha kings, especially not to rejected mates leading armies of exiles. Nyra studied the messenger, looking for deception, looking for the subtle tells that marked liars, finding only fear and confusion. A boy barely old enough to fight carrying a message he didn't understand, caught between two forces that would crush him without noticing. Tell your king I accept, she said. The messenger's eyes widened. You will? I will, Nyra confirmed. Tell him the Ghost Queen will meet him at Blackthorn Keep at dawn, alone. And if he brings so much as a single guard, I'll kill them all and burn his city anyway. The messenger bowed awkwardly and fled, stumbling over frozen ground in his hurry to escape her presence. Kyle grabbed her arm the moment the boy disappeared. You can't seriously be considering this. Nyra pulled free. Why not? Because it's obviously a trap, Kyle said. He'll ambush you, kill you, cut the head off your army and scatter the rest back into Frostfang. Maybe, Nyra agreed. Or maybe he actually wants to talk. The bond has been screaming between us for days. Maybe he's finally ready to face what he did. And you believe that? Kale demanded. After everything? After he rejected you publicly? After he exiled you to die? You think he suddenly grew a conscience? No, Nyra said, but I'm going anyway. This is insane. Probably, Nyra agreed. But I didn't come all this way to hide behind an army. I came to face the man who destroyed me, to make him look me in the eyes and acknowledge what his crown cost, to see if any part of the mate bond means anything or if it's just biology pretending to be destiny. Kael's expression hardened. Then I'm coming with you. No. Your Majesty. I said no, Nyra cut him off. This is between me and Vylor. Nobody else. If it's a trap, my death won't stop this army. You'll burn the capital anyway. You'll make sure everyone who demanded my exile pays the price. If it's real, then maybe we can end this without slaughtering thousands. You've changed, Kael said quietly. The woman who walked into Ironmaw 4 months ago would never risk herself like this. She was harder, colder, pure survival instinct. The woman who walked into Ironmaw died somewhere between there and here, Nyra said. What came back is something else. Something that needs to know if the mate bond is real or just another lie the universe tells to make suffering bearable. She walked away before he could argue further. Back to her tent. Alone. The bond pulsed steadily, counting down hours until she faced Vylor again. Until she stood before the man who'd rejected her and decided whether revenge or mercy defined who she'd become. Whether she was still human enough to choose anything except violence. Nyra didn't sleep that night, just sat in darkness, feeling the Moonborn power coil through her veins like living electricity. The dead queens whispered warnings, said meeting Vylor alone was suicide, said Alpha Kings couldn't be trusted, said she should kill him from a distance, invade his mind, break him, make him suffer the way she suffered, make him understand that weakness was just strength waiting for the right moment to strike back. But Nyra needed to see his face, needed to hear his voice, needed to know if any part of the man she'd started to love still existed beneath the crown that destroyed them both. Because that was the terrible truth she'd been avoiding. She had loved him, briefly, desperately. In those first weeks of marriage before reality crushed hope completely, she'd loved the way he moved, the rare moments when he smiled, the intelligence in his eyes, the strength that could have protected her if he'd chosen differently. And part of her hated that she still remembered those moments, still held them like treasures despite everything. Dawn came too quickly. Nyra dressed in black leather armor stitched together from her kills in Frostfang, weapons strapped to her body, knives, a short sword, tools of violence she'd learned to use with brutal efficiency. Power hummed beneath her skin like a storm about to break. She looked like death walking, like vengeance carved from ice and moonlight, like everything the Empire feared when they whispered about Moonborn queens rising from extinction. Kael waited outside her tent, silent, disapproving, arms crossed over his scarred chest. "If you're not back by noon," he said quietly, "we burn it all." Nyra nodded, understood the promise, understood that her death would mean the capital's destruction, that thousands would die because she chose to trust the bond one final time, then walked toward Blackthorn Keep alone. The ruins sat 3 miles north of the capital, ancient stone towers crumbling into snow, walls that once held back armies reduced to broken teeth jutting from frozen earth. This was where the first Lycari king united the clans centuries ago, where tribal warfare ended and empire began, where everything started. Fitting place for it to end. Nyra reached the ruins as sunrise painted the sky blood red. Appropriate. Everything about this moment felt like bleeding, like wounds that never healed properly, like scars carved so deep they became part of your identity. Valor was already there, standing in the center of what used to be the Great Hall, alone as promised. No guards, no advisors, no soldiers hiding in shadows, just the Alpha King stripped of everything except the bond connecting them. He looked terrible. 4 months had carved lines into his face that hadn't existed before. Silver eyes shadowed with exhaustion that went beyond sleepless nights. Jaw tight with tension that spoke of constant pain. He'd lost weight. Lost the certainty that used to armor him better than steel. Lost the cold calculation that made him dangerous. He looked like a man being eaten alive from the inside. Good, Nyra thought viciously. Let him suffer. They stared at each other across broken stone and 4 months of destruction. The bond screamed between them, stronger here, louder, like it knew this was the moment that would determine whether it healed or shattered completely, whether fate's choice meant anything, or if free will could break even destiny. "You came," Valor said. His voice was rough, unused to gentleness, like he'd forgotten how to speak to anyone who mattered. "You asked," Nyra replied, "though I'm still deciding if that was brave or stupid." "Probably both," Valor admitted. Silence stretched between them, heavy, suffocating, filled with everything they'd never said and everything they couldn't unsay. Nyra waited. Let him speak first. Let him try to justify what he'd done. Let him prove whether the regret flooding through the bond was real or manipulation. Whether Alpha Kings could actually feel remorse or if power killed that part of them. "I was wrong," Valor said finally, "about everything. Rejecting you didn't save the Empire. It destroyed it faster. The nobles lied. The council lied. They wanted you gone because you represented change, because you threatened their power, because a half-human queen reminded them that bloodlines weren't everything, and I was too blind to see it." Nyra's expression didn't change. "So you sacrificed me for nothing?" "Yes," Valor said. "No hedging, no excuses, just admission. And now you want forgiveness?" "No," Valor said. "I want you to know the truth, that I've spent every day regretting it, that the bond burning in my chest is the only punishment severe enough for what I did, that I wake up every morning feeling your pain through the connection and knowing I caused it." Nyra laughed. The sound was sharp, broken, edges like shattered glass. "You think guilt is punishment?" she asked. "You think feeling bad makes this better?" "I was exiled, thrown into a wasteland to die. I survived by eating rats and learning to kill with my mind. I became a monster because that was the only way to stay alive. Your regret doesn't undo that." "I know," Valor said quietly. "Then why am I here? Why drag me to these ruins for a confession that changes nothing?" Valor took a step closer. "Because I'm offering you a choice." "What choice?" "Kill me," Valor said. "Right here, right now. Take your revenge. Let the mate bond snap. End this war before thousands die. I'll kneel. I'll give you the execution you deserve to deliver. Just spare the city." Nyra stared at him, searching for tricks, for deception, for the trap Kael promised was coming, finding only exhaustion and something that looked like desperate honesty. "You're serious," she said. "Yes. You'd let me kill you?" "If it gives you peace," Valor said. if it ends the war, if it saves the Empire from burning, then yes, I'll die on my knees before the woman I rejected. Nyra's power surged, Moonborn energy flooding the ruins, making stone crack under psychic pressure, making air temperature drop, making reality itself bend around her rage. She could kill him, easily, invade his mind, make him experience every moment of suffering she'd endured, make him feel the cold, the hunger, the terror of being abandoned. She could make him beg, make him scream, make him understand exactly what his crown cost her. The dead queens whispered encouragement, urged her to do it, said Alpha Kings only understood power, said mercy was weakness, said this was justice, said this was what survival required. Nyra raised her hand, power coiled around her fingers like living lightning, silver energy that could tear minds apart, that could make strong men claw their own eyes out, that could reduce the Alpha King to a whimpering child in seconds. Valor didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even raise his hands to defend himself, just stood there waiting for death with the kind of calm that came from accepting the inevitable, from deciding that some mistakes earned execution. "Do it," he said quietly. "I deserve it. I deserve worse than it. But this is all I can offer." Nyra's hand trembled, because killing him would be easy. Forgiving him would be impossible. But somewhere between those options existed a third choice, one that terrified her more than revenge or mercy combined. What if they tried again? What if the mate bond meant something beyond biology? What if destroying each other wasn't the only ending? The thought was insane, suicidal. Everything she'd learned in Frostfang screamed that trust was weakness, that survival meant hardness, that the only way forward was through blood and ash and absolute refusal to show vulnerability. But standing here staring at Valor, feeling the bond pulse between them like a living thing, Nyra realized something. She was tired. Tired of rage. Tired of planning revenge. Tired of being the monster everyone expected. Tired of letting their choices define who she became. She lowered her hand slowly, power dissipating like smoke. Valor's eyes widened. Shock, confusion. Hope he didn't dare voice. "I'm not killing you," Nyra said. "Why not?" "Because it would be too easy," she said. "Because you dying doesn't fix what's broken. Because maybe the worst punishment is making you live with what you did. Making you rule an empire while knowing you destroyed the one person who could have made that burden bearable." Valor took another step closer. "Nyra, Arrows punched through his chest before he could finish. 3 of them. Black shafts with silver fletching, assassin weapons. Professional, lethal. Valor gasped, stumbled backward, fell to his knees, blood poured from the wounds. Too much blood. Arterial spray that painted snow crimson. Nyra spun. Soldiers poured from the ruins. Dozens of them. Wearing Capital Guard armor. Moving with coordinated precision. Led by Lord Mordain, the Chancellor. The old man smiled with satisfaction that looked almost sexual, like he'd been waiting decades for this moment. "The Ghost Queen and the failed king," he said, "both dead in one stroke. How beautifully convenient." Nyra's power exploded outward. Half the soldiers collapsed immediately, minds shattered by manufactured terror that invaded like poison. But more kept coming. Too many. And they wore medallions around their necks, strange symbols carved into silver that glowed with energy that felt wrong. Magic-forged protection. Ancient, expensive, planned. The dampening effect was immediate. Nyra's power slammed against invisible walls. She could break through eventually, could shatter the protection given time, but time was something Valor didn't have. This wasn't Valor's trap, it was Mordain's. "You planned this," Nyra snarled. "Used Valor's message to lure me here." "Of course," Mordain said. "The king was too weak to do what needed doing, too poisoned by the mate bond, too corrupted by sentiment. So the council took matters into our own hands." Valor coughed blood, tried to stand, collapsed again. Arrows deep in vital organs. "Mordain, you bastard! You were supposed to be strong," the Chancellor said. His voice carried disappointment like a father scolding a failed son. "Supposed to value the throne above everything, above mates, above destiny, above the biological weakness that makes wolves vulnerable. Instead, you moped over a half-human mistake, became useless to the Empire. So we're replacing you." "With who?" Nyra demanded. "Already moving. positioning herself between Valor and the advancing soldiers. Lord Theron stepped from the shadows, face hard, apologetic but determined. The gray-bearded warrior who'd seemed uncomfortable with her exile, who'd argued against it, who'd looked genuinely troubled when she was dragged from the throne room. All of it performance. "With me," Theron said. The council voted, a new Alpha King to lead the Empire properly, without the weakness of sentiment. "You," Nyra said. "Betrayal tasted like copper and ash. You were part of this." "I tried to warn you both," Theron said. "Tried to stop the madness before it consumed you, but you wouldn't listen. Valor chose his mate over his crown. You chose revenge over reason. So we did what was necessary for the Empire's survival." "Necessary," Nyra repeated. The word felt obscene. "Murdering your king is necessary? When he becomes weak, yes," Mordain said. "That's the first law of Empire. Strength above all. Your husband forgot that. Became corrupted by a bond that should have been severed the moment it threatened his rule. More soldiers surrounded them, weapons drawn, crossbows loaded, swords ready. Nyra could feel her power straining against the dampening medallions. She could break through, kill them all. But it would take time, effort, concentration. Time Valor didn't have. He was bleeding out. 3 arrows deep in vital organs. Lung, liver, kidney, dying. The mate bond was screaming, agony flooding through the connection as Valor's life drained into frozen ground. Nyra had seconds to choose, fight and let Valor die, or save him and risk everything. This was the moment, the choice that would define who she'd become. Monster or mate, revenge or survival, power or love. Nyra made her decision. She dropped to her knees beside Valor, pressed both hands against his wounds, let Moonborn power flood through him in ways she'd never attempted. Not to harm, not to invade, to heal. The energy burned through her system like acid through veins, consumed reserves she'd spent months building, drained strength she couldn't afford to lose. But it was working. The bleeding slowed, his breathing steadied. The arrows were still there, still lethal, but the power was keeping him alive. Barely. Soldiers rushed forward. Nyra unleashed everything she had left. The psychic shockwave tore through the ruins like a bomb detonating inside reality itself. Soldiers screamed, dropped. Minds fragmenting under pressure no living thing was meant to endure. The dampening medallions cracked, shattered. Useless against power fueled by desperate rage and absolute refusal to lose him. Not like this, not to betrayal. Mordain fell, clutching his head, blood pouring from his nose. Theron collapsed, strong mind shattering like glass under hammer. The entire ambush force reduced to whimpering children in 30 seconds. Nyra stood over them, power blazing from her skin like visible radiation, eyes glowing silver bright enough to hurt, hair lifting in wind that wasn't wind. She looked like the ancient queens, like nightmare made flesh, like everything the Empire feared when they whispered about Moonborn rising from extinction. "You want to see a monster?" she asked quietly. "You want to see what weakness looks like when it stops apologizing?" She could kill them all. Should kill them all. They'd betrayed their king, tried to murder her, planned to reshape the Empire in their image while discarding anyone who didn't fit their definition of strength. But killing them would make her exactly what they thought she was, would prove that Moonborn were monsters, that power corrupted absolutely, that survival required becoming the thing you hated most. Nyra looked down at Valor, still breathing, still alive, still her mate, whether she wanted him or not. "Can you walk?" she asked. Valor nodded weakly, barely, but enough. She pulled him to his feet, let him lean on her, started walking back toward her army. Behind them, Mordain's voice wheezed, broken but defiant. "This changes nothing. The Council will hunt you both. You'll never be safe, never be accepted. The Empire will never bow to a half-human monster and her weak king." Nyra looked back once. "Then you'd better run far," she said, "because the Ghost Queen just became the Avenging Queen, and I'm coming for everyone who thought weakness was something to exploit. Everyone who believes strength means discarding people like broken tools. Everyone who thinks power matters more than the lives it's supposed to protect." She carried Valor from the ruins while sunrise painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. The mate bond pulsed, stronger than before, because she'd chosen. Not revenge, not mercy, survival. And survival meant protecting the one person fate had given her, even if he'd tried to throw her away. Even if trusting him was insane. Even if the Empire would burn because of it. Nyra didn't know what came next, only knew that she'd just changed everything by refusing to become the monster they expected, by choosing to save the man who destroyed her, by deciding that maybe the mate bond meant something beyond biology and destiny. And that choice would either redeem them both or doom them completely. But at least it would be their choice, not the Empire's, not the Council's, not fate's, theirs. Nyra half-carried, half-dragged Valor back toward her camp while dawn bled across the horizon like a wound that wouldn't close. Every step was agony, not physical pain. She'd learned to ignore that months ago in Frostfang. This was deeper. The kind of exhaustion that came from burning through power reserves that shouldn't exist, from using Moonborn abilities to heal instead of harm, from choosing to save instead of destroy. The arrows were still buried in Valor's chest. She'd stopped the bleeding, kept his heart pumping, but removing them would kill him instantly. The shafts were all that held his organs together, all that prevented him from bleeding out in seconds. He needed a healer, real medical attention, not just psychic bandages holding torn flesh in temporary suspension. "Keep walking," she muttered. "Just keep moving." Valor's breathing was ragged, wet, blood bubbled at the corners of his mouth. "I'm sorry." "Save it," Nyra said. "You can apologize after you survive. If I survive..." "You will," Nyra said with certainty she didn't feel. "Because I didn't drag you out of those ruins just to watch you die on the road." The mate bond pulsed between them, weaker than before, flickering like a candle in wind. Nyra could feel his life force draining despite her best efforts, could feel him slipping away inch by inch. She walked faster. Her army saw them coming from half a mile away. Kael met them at the perimeter with 50 warriors, weapons drawn, ready for battle. His one good eye widened when he saw Valor bleeding against Nyra's shoulder. "What the hell happened?" "Ambush," Nyra said. "Mordain and Theron. They tried to kill us both, replace Valor with a king who wouldn't be weakened by the mate bond." "Is he alive?" "Barely," Nyra said. "I need healers. Now." Kael barked orders. Warriors scattered. Within minutes, they'd erected a command tent, cleared space, brought water and bandages, and the closest thing to medical supplies a rogue army possessed. Nyra laid Valor on furs spread across frozen ground. His skin was pale, lips blue, heartbeat erratic beneath her palm. A woman pushed through the crowd, old, scarred, missing 3 fingers on her left hand. "I was a field medic before Exile," she said. "Let me see him." Nyra stepped back reluctantly. The old woman examined Valor with practiced efficiency, checked the arrow wounds, listened to his breathing, felt his pulse. Her expression grew grimmer with each passing second. "He's dying," she said finally. Blunt, honest. "Those arrows hit vital organs. Liver, lung, maybe kidney. Even if we remove them carefully, he'll bleed out before we can cauterize. And leaving them in means infection, sepsis, death in days instead of hours." Nyra's hands clenched into fists. "There has to be something." "There isn't," the medic said. "Not with what we have. He needs a royal healer. Someone with magic-forged tools and decades of training. We're rogues, Your Majesty. We make do with field medicine and prayer." "Then I'll keep him alive," Nyra said. "With what?" the medic asked. "You can't maintain healing power indefinitely. You're already pale, shaking. You've burned through your reserves keeping him stable this long. If you push further, you'll kill yourself." "Then I'll die keeping him alive," Nyra said simply. Kael grabbed her arm. "You're talking crazy. He's the king who exiled you, who threw you into Frostfang to die. Why are you willing to destroy yourself saving him?" "Because he's my mate," Nyra said. "Because the bond chose us for a reason. Because maybe saving him is how I prove I'm still human under all this power." "This is insane," Kael said. "Probably," Nyra agreed. "But I've been insane since the moment I survived exile. Might as well commit to it." She knelt beside Valor, placed both hands over his chest, let Moonborn power flow through her again, felt it burning through her system like acid, like fire, like something fundamental inside her was being consumed to fuel the healing. The old medic was right. She couldn't maintain this indefinitely. Hours, maybe. Days if she was lucky. But it would have to be enough. Vaelor's eyes opened, silver irises clouded with pain. You're killing yourself. Not yet, Nyra said. You should let me go, Vaelor whispered. Should let the bond snap. Take my throne. Rule the empire properly. Shut up, Nyra said. Save your strength. I'm serious, Vaelor insisted. You'd be a better ruler than I ever was. Stronger, wiser, not corrupted by— I said shut up, Nyra snapped. I didn't save you at Blackthorn just to listen to you give up now. Why did you save me? Vaelor asked. After everything I did, after I destroyed you. Why? Nyra was quiet for a long moment, power flowing through her hands into his broken body, keeping his heart beating, keeping his lungs inflating, keeping death at bay through sheer stubborn refusal to let go. Because someone needed to prove that the mate bond means something, she said finally. That it's not just biology or destiny playing games with people's lives. Because if I let you die, I become exactly what they think I am, a monster, and I'm tired of being what other people expect. The tent flap opened. A scout entered, breathing hard, face pale. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Of course we do, Kael muttered. What now? The capital, the scout said. They're mobilizing. Full army, every legion, they're coming for us. How long? Nyra asked without looking up from Vaelor. 2 hours, the scout said, maybe less, and they outnumber us 5-1. Kael swore viciously. We can't fight that, not in open ground. We need to retreat, scatter into Frostfang and regroup. No, Nyra said. No? Kael repeated. Your Majesty, we'll be slaughtered. Then we'll be slaughtered, Nyra said. But we're not running, not after coming this far. This is suicide, Kael said. This is commitment, Nyra corrected. We came here to face the Empire, to force them to acknowledge what they did to everyone they discarded. Running now makes everything meaningless. You can't fight an entire army while keeping him alive, Kael said. Choose one or the other. Nyra finally looked up, power blazing in her eyes. I choose both. The tent went silent. Kael stared at her. You've lost your mind. Probably, Nyra agreed. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to take command of the army. Position them defensively. Make the Empire come to us. I'll handle the rest. Handle how exactly? Nyra smiled. It was not a kind expression. By showing them what a Moonborn queen can do when she stops holding back. The Empire's army reached them 90 minutes later, 5,000 soldiers, full legions, alpha warriors in formation, siege weapons, cavalry, archers, everything the capital could muster on short notice, led by Lord Theron himself, apparently recovered from the psychic assault, apparently determined to finish what the ambush started. They stopped half a mile away. Professional distance, battle formation. Theron rode forward alone, graybeard braided, armor polished, face hard as stone. He stopped 50 yards from Nyra's position. Ghost Queen, he called. Surrender now, and I promise mercy for your followers. They were misled, deceived by Moonborn manipulation. But you and the failed king must answer for treason. Nyra stood at the front of her army, Vaelor unconscious behind her in the command tent, power humming beneath her skin like electricity looking for ground. Mercy, she called back. Like the mercy you showed when you tried to murder your king? Like the mercy the council showed when they exiled me to die? The king became weak, Theron said, corrupted by the mate bond. We did what was necessary to save the Empire. You did what was convenient to consolidate power, Nyra corrected. Use the mate bond as excuse to replace a king you couldn't control. The Empire requires strength, Theron said, not sentiment, not weakness disguised as destiny. Your husband forgot that. Now he pays the price. He's not paying anything, Nyra said, because I'm not letting you kill him. You can't stop us, Theron said. You're one woman. Powerful, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But still just one woman against 5,000 warriors. Surrender and at least your followers might survive. Nyra let power leak from her control. Just a whisper, just enough. The Empire's front rank stumbled. Horses screamed. Warriors gasped as manufactured fear brushed against their minds. I'm not just one woman, Nyra said quietly. I'm every person you discarded, every soul you deemed worthless, every life you destroyed for convenience. And today you learn what happens when weakness stops apologizing and starts fighting back. She unleashed the full weight of her power. The psychic shockwaves slammed into the Empire's army like a physical wall. Thousands of minds invaded simultaneously. Not to kill, not yet. Just to remind them what terror felt like. To make them experience the fear she'd felt when they threw her into Frostfang. The helplessness. The abandonment. The absolute certainty that nobody cared if you lived or died. The front ranks collapsed, screaming, clawing at their helmets, trying to escape the horror flooding their minds. But Nyra was just getting started. She'd spent 4 months learning to wield Moonborn abilities, 4 months practicing on animals, on rogues, on anyone who threatened her survival, 4 months becoming something the Empire thought was extinct. Now she was going to show them why Moonborn queens were feared, why the Lakari clans had united specifically to hunt them down, why power this absolute couldn't be allowed to exist. She walked forward slowly. Her army stayed back. This wasn't their fight. This was hers. 1 woman against 5,000. The mathematics should have been impossible. But mathematics didn't account for power that invaded minds, that turned instincts against themselves, that made predators into prey. The Empire's second rank charged, 200 cavalry, alpha-blooded, trained for decades, bred for warfare. Nyra stopped them with a thought, made their horses panic, made the riders see monsters in shadows, made them turn on each other in confusion and manufactured rage. Chaos erupted, warriors attacked their own brothers, commanders shouted contradictory orders. The disciplined formation dissolved into panicked violence, and Nyra kept walking, kept pushing, kept invading mind after mind after mind until the psychic pressure threatened to split her skull open. This was the cost of Moonborn power. Every mind she touched, she felt. Every fear she manufactured, she experienced. Every moment of terror she created echoed through her own consciousness. It was agony. It was violation. It was becoming the monster to survive the monsters. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop, because Valor was dying in the tent behind her, because her army was outnumbered, because if she showed weakness now, everyone who followed her would die. So she pushed harder, deeper, made entire battalions collapse under psychic assault. Theron rallied the rear guard, organized a defensive line, brought up reserves. He was good, experienced, knew how to fight unconventional threats, but he'd never fought a Moonborn. Nobody alive had. Nyra reached the center of the battlefield, surrounded by thousands of enemies, power blazing from her skin bright enough to cast shadows in daylight. "Enough!" Theron roared. "Archers, fire!" Arrows darkened the sky, hundreds of them, thousands. A killing storm. Nyra raised both hands. Power exploded outward in a dome, invisible, absolute. The arrows hit the psychic barrier and disintegrated, burned to ash by energy that shouldn't exist. The archers stared in horror. Nyra smiled, then showed them what real horror looked like. She invaded every mind within 100 yards simultaneously, made them see their worst nightmares, made them experience death, made them feel their souls being torn apart. Half of them died instantly, hearts stopping from pure terror. The other half went mad, screaming, clawing at themselves, begging for mercy from horrors only they could see. The Empire's army broke. 5,000 warriors reduced to panicked mob, running, fleeing, trampling each other in their desperation to escape the Ghost Queen. Only Theron remained, standing alone in the center of carnage, sword drawn, face pale but determined. "You can't kill us all," he said. "Eventually you'll burn out. Eventually the power will consume you. And when it does, the Empire will hunt down every rogue who followed you." Nyra walked toward him. "You're right. I can't kill everyone, can't fight the entire Empire, but I can kill you." "Then do it," Theron said. "Prove you're the monster we always knew you were." Nyra stopped 10 feet away. Power coiled around her like visible radiation. She could kill him, should kill him. He'd betrayed Valor, tried to murder them both, would absolutely try again given the chance. But killing him would prove them right, would validate every fear about Moonborn queens, would confirm that power this absolute inevitably corrupted, that survival required becoming the thing you fought against. "I'm not the monster," Nyra said quietly. "You are. You and the Council and everyone who thinks strength means discarding people like broken tools. I'm just the consequence of your choices. The weapon you created when you threw me away. She turned and walked back toward her camp, leaving Theron alive, leaving the Empire's shattered army to regroup. Kael met her halfway, face shocked. We won! You actually did it! No, Nyra said. I delayed them, bought time. But they'll be back, with more soldiers, better preparation, magic that counters Moonborn abilities. Then what do we do? Nyra looked back at the command tent where Valor fought for his life. We finish this, one way or another. How? By making the Empire choose, Nyra said, between the old ways that value power over everything, and a new way that values the lives power is supposed to protect. You're talking about revolution, Kael said. I'm talking about survival, Nyra corrected. Real survival. Not just staying alive, but building something worth staying alive for. She walked back to the tent. Valor was worse, paler, breathing shallow, heartbeat irregular. The old medic looked up, shook her head. Hours at most. The infection is spreading despite your power. His body is shutting down. Nyra knelt beside him, placed hands over his chest. Let power flow again. But the medic was right. She could feel it. Feel him slipping away. The mate bond was fraying, unraveling, dying. Valor's eyes opened. You're fading too. I can feel it through the bond. We're both fading, Nyra admitted. Then let me go, Valor whispered. Save yourself. No. Nyra, I said no. She cut him off. I didn't survive Frostfang to lose you now. Didn't face down an entire army to watch you die. We're finishing this together or not at all. You're insane, Valor said, but there was something like love in his voice. Probably, Nyra agreed. The tent flap opened. A runner entered, breathless, terrified. Your Majesty, scouts report the Empire is regrouping. They're bringing in reinforcements from the southern territories. Fresh legions, 10,000 strong. They'll be here by nightfall. Kael swore. We can't fight that. Not after what you just did. You're exhausted. The army is terrified. We need to retreat while we still can. Nyra looked down at Valor, at the man who'd destroyed her, who'd exiled her, who'd chosen his crown over his mate, who she'd chosen to save anyway. The mate bond pulsed weakly, and suddenly Nyra understood what needed to happen, the only way forward that didn't end in everyone's death. Tell the army to prepare for battle, she said quietly. What? Kael demanded. You heard me, Nyra said. We fight. Tonight. Final battle. Winner takes the Empire. You can't fight 10,000 soldiers, Kael said. You're barely staying conscious. He's dying. This is suicide. Nyra smiled. Not suicide, she said. Sacrifice. There's a difference. She looked at Kael, at the warriors gathered outside, at the army of exiles who'd followed her across frozen wastes because she represented hope, because she proved survival meant something, because she showed them that being discarded didn't mean being worthless. Tell them the truth, she said, that I'm going to end this war, that I'm going to make the Empire choose between the old ways and a new path, that whatever happens tonight, they fought for something that mattered. Kael's expression hardened. You're planning something. I'm planning everything, Nyra said. Now go, rally the army, prepare for battle. And you? I'm going to save my mate, Nyra said. Then I'm going to save an empire that doesn't deserve it. Kael left reluctantly. Nyra turned back to Valor. He was watching her with silver eyes that saw too much. What are you planning? He asked. The only thing that makes sense, Nyra said. The only choice that ends this without oceans of blood, which is? Nyra leaned down, pressed her forehead against his. The mate bond flared, weak but present, still connecting them, still binding them together, despite everything. I'm going to challenge the Empire to single combat, she said. Me against their champion. Winner claims the throne. Loser surrenders everything. That's insane, Valor said. They'll choose their strongest warrior. You're exhausted, burning out. You'll die. Probably, Nyra agreed, but at least I'll die on my terms. Fighting for something I chose. Not running, not hiding, not becoming the monster they expect. Valor grabbed her hand, weak but determined. Don't do this. I have to, Nyra said. It's the only way to protect everyone who followed me. The only way to force the Empire to acknowledge what they did. The only way to prove that the mate bond means something beyond biology. You'll die, Valor repeated. Maybe, Nyra said. Or maybe I'll win. Maybe I'll become the queen this empire needs. Either way, this ends tonight. She stood, walked to the 10 entrance, looked back once at the man who'd destroyed her, who she'd chosen to save, who she was willing to die protecting. If I don't survive, she said quietly, you rebuild this empire properly. You make it better. You prove that sacrifice can mean something beyond power. Valor's eyes filled with something that looked like tears. And if you do survive? Then we rebuild it together, Nyra said. She walked out into the dying light. The army was gathering. Thousands of exiles, rogues, discarded warriors, all watching her, all waiting for orders. Nyra climbed onto a stone outcrop, let moonlight catch her face, let power radiate from her skin. Tonight we end this, she called. Her voice carried across frozen ground. Tonight I challenge the Empire to single combat. Their champion against me. Winner claims the throne and the right to reshape what comes next. The army erupted. Protests, arguments, warriors shouting that she couldn't fight alone. But Nyra raised a hand. Silence fell. I know you're afraid, she said. I know this sounds like suicide, but I didn't bring you here to die. I brought you here to witness change, to see an empire forced to acknowledge what it did, to prove that being discarded doesn't mean being worthless. She paused. Let the moment breathe. So tonight, you watch. You bear witness. And if I fall, you tell the story of the Ghost Queen who refused to become the monster they expected, who chose sacrifice over surrender, who proved that the mate bond means something real. Silence. Then Kael started pounding his sword against his shield. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire army was making the sound. The drumbeat of warriors acknowledging courage, acknowledging choice, acknowledging that some things were worth dying for. Nyra smiled, then turned toward the capital, toward the Empire's approaching army, toward the final battle that would determine everything. The sun was setting, blood red across frozen horizon, perfect, because everything about this moment felt like bleeding, like wounds that would never fully heal, like sacrifice measured in heartbeats and breath. Nyra sent the challenge at midnight, single messenger, white flag, formal terms. The Ghost Queen challenges the Empire to single combat. Choose your champion. Winner claims the throne. Loser surrenders all claims to rule. The response came at dawn. Lord Theron himself would be the champion. The battle would occur at noon, at the ruins of Blackthorn Keep, where everything started, where everything would end. Nyra spent the morning with Valor. He was barely conscious, fading despite her power, but his eyes tracked her movements. His hand gripped hers. You don't have to do this, he whispered. Yes, I do, Nyra said. Why? Because someone needs to prove that love is stronger than power, she said. That the mate bond means something beyond destiny's games. That choosing to save instead of destroy is the real strength. Valor's grip tightened. I don't deserve you. No, Nyra agreed. But you're mine anyway. And I protect what's mine. She kissed him once, gentle, final, then walked toward Blackthorn Keep alone. The armies gathered on opposite sides. Empire forces, 10,000 strong. Rogue army, 3,000 exiles, all watching, all waiting. Theron stood in the center of the ruins, fully armed, experienced, strong. Nyra approached from the opposite direction, unarmed except for power, exhausted, dying for maintaining Valor's life, but absolutely certain. They stopped 10 feet apart. Last chance to surrender, Theron said. Never, Nyra replied. Then let's finish this. The battle began, and the Empire held its breath. The ruins of Blackthorn Keep fell silent as Theron drew his blade. Steel sang against leather. The sound echoed off crumbling stone like a bell tolling execution. The weapon was old, ancient, forged during the first wars that united the Lykari clans, passed down through generations of warriors who knew that survival sometimes required becoming the monster. Nyra stood empty-handed, no weapons, no armor, just power humming beneath her skin like electricity waiting for ground, an exhaustion so deep her bones ached. This was the cost of keeping Valor alive, of maintaining healing energy for hours while her own reserves burned away, of facing down an empire's army and living to fight again. Her body was failing, shutting down, demanding rest she couldn't afford. But her mind was clear, sharp, focused on the choice she'd made: fight until she couldn't fight anymore. Then keep fighting anyway. Theron circled slowly, professional, calculating, looking for weakness, for openings, for the moment when exhaustion made her vulnerable. "You don't have to die today," he said. "Surrender. Acknowledge that the Empire requires strength, that sentiment weakens us, that the mate bond corrupts judgment." Nyra turned with him, keeping distance, conserving energy. "The mate bond does corrupt judgment. You're right about that. It makes people choose love over power, makes them value one life over thousands, makes them believe that saving someone matters more than ruling everyone." "Exactly," Theron said. "That's why it's weakness." "No," Nyra corrected, "that's why it's human. Power without humanity isn't strength. It's just violence pretending to be leadership." "Pretty words," Theron said, "but words don't win battles." He attacked, fast, brutal. Decades of training compressed into movements too quick to track. Nyra dodged backward. Let Moonborn power explode outward. Not to kill, just to push, create distance, give herself breathing room. Theron stumbled but recovered instantly. He wore one of those dampening medallions, magic-forged protection against psychic assault. She could break through eventually, could shatter it like she'd shattered the others, but eventually required time. And time was something she didn't have. Theron pressed the attack, blade cutting air where Nyra had been heartbeats before. She moved on instinct. Survival reflexes honed in Frostfang when hesitation meant death. Her body remembered how to fight even when her mind was fracturing from exhaustion. But she couldn't keep dodging forever. Sooner or later, he would connect. And when he did, the battle would end. "This is pointless," Theron said. "You're exhausted, dying. Every moment you maintain power, you burn out faster. Surrender, and I'll make it quick." Nyra laughed. The sound was broken, edged with hysteria. "Quick," she repeated. "Like the mercy you showed Valor? Like the compassion you demonstrated when you exiled me?" "That was necessity," Theron said, "not cruelty." "Funny how those two things look identical from the receiving end," Nyra said. She stopped retreating, planted her feet, let power build inside her chest like a storm gathering strength. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything. She could kill Theron, invade his mind, break him like she'd broken hundreds of others, make him experience every moment of suffering she'd endured, make him feel the cold, the hunger, the absolute certainty that nobody cared if you lived or died. She could make him beg, make him scream, make him understand what his version of strength actually cost. The dead Moonborn queens whispered encouragement, urged her to do it, said mercy was weakness, said survival required becoming the predator, said this was justice. But Nyra was tired of justice that looked like revenge, tired of strength that required cruelty, tired of surviving at the cost of her humanity. So she made a different choice. She dropped the power completely, let it dissipate like smoke, stood defenseless before a warrior who could kill her in seconds. The armies watching from both sides gasped, confused, horrified. This was surrender. This was suicide. This was the Ghost Queen throwing away the only advantage she possessed. Theron stopped mid-stride, blade raised. "Kill me," Nyra said quietly. "Prove that might makes right, that the Empire's strength comes from discarding anyone who doesn't fit your definition of powerful. Prove that the mate bond is weakness and sentiment is corruption." "What are you doing?" Theron demanded. "Showing you what real strength looks like," Nyra said. "Real strength isn't domination, isn't the ability to hurt people, isn't power over others. Real strength is choosing mercy when revenge would be easier, choosing compassion when cruelty would be safer, choosing to save instead of destroy, even when destruction is justified." "You're insane," Theron said. "Probably," Nyra agreed, "but I'd rather be insane and human than sane and monstrous." Theron's blade trembled. "Do you think this changes anything? That laying down your power makes you noble? You're just weak, just proving everything we believed about you." "Maybe," Nyra said. "Or maybe I'm proving that your version of strength is what's actually weak, that an empire built on discarding people will eventually run out of people to discard. That power without purpose is just violence waiting for a target." "Enough," Theron snarled. He lunged, blade aimed at her heart. Nyra didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there waiting for the end. The mate bond screamed. 300 yards away, Valor felt it, felt Nyra's life about to end, felt the connection between them about to snap. His eyes opened, body moving on instinct older than thought. He shouldn't have been able to stand, should have been dying, should have been unconscious. But the mate bond was absolute. When one mate faced death, the other felt it like their own execution. Valor rose from the medical tent, arrows still buried in his chest, blood soaking through bandages, walking on will alone. The old medic tried to stop him. "Your Majesty, you can't—" He pushed past her, stumbled, fell, forced himself upright, kept walking. One step, then another, then another. Moving toward Blackthorn Keep while his body screamed that this was impossible. But impossible was just another word for things that required everything. And Valor had nothing left except everything. At Blackthorn Keep, Theron's blade stopped an inch from Nyra's heart. Not because he chose to stop, because something inside him broke. Because watching someone choose death over fighting shattered something fundamental about his worldview. Because he'd spent his entire life believing strength meant the ability to hurt. That power meant dominance. That survival required becoming the predator. And here was a woman proving him wrong, proving that choosing mercy took more courage than choosing violence, proving that real strength wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite fear. It was choosing humanity even when monstrosity was easier. It was standing defenseless before someone who could kill you and trusting that human decency still meant something. Theron's blade fell, clattered against stone. He stepped back, face pale, shaking. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't kill someone who won't fight back." "Then the Empire has its answer," Nyra said quietly. "Strength without compassion isn't strength. It's just cruelty pretending to be leadership." Theron fell to his knees. Behind him, the Empire's 10,000 warriors watched in stunned silence. Because their champion had just surrendered to a woman who'd laid down her power. Because their definition of strength had just been proven hollow. Because everything they believed about weakness and worth had just been challenged by someone refusing to become the monster. The silence stretched. Then someone in the Empire's ranks started removing their helmet. Then another. Then another. Within minutes, hundreds of warriors were disarming, laying down weapons, acknowledging that maybe the Ghost Queen was right, that maybe an empire built on discarding people was an empire worth changing. Theron looked up at Nyra. "What now?" "Now we rebuild," Nyra said. "We create an empire that values people instead of just using them. We prove that the mate bond isn't weakness, that compassion isn't corruption, that strength comes from protecting instead of destroying." "And me?" Theron asked. "What happens to those of us who enforce the old ways?" Nyra was quiet for a moment. "You live with what you did. You work to make it better. You prove that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define you forever." "That's mercy," Theron said. "That's humanity," Nyra corrected. "Movement at the edge of the ruins." Valor appeared, stumbling, dying, held upright by pure stubborn refusal to let the mate bond snap. He reached Nyra and collapsed into her arms. "You're alive," he gasped. "Barely," Nyra said. "You shouldn't be standing." "Neither should you," Valor said. "But here we are anyway." The bond pulsed between them, stronger than before, not broken, not corrupted. Healing. Nyra pressed her forehead against his. "We survived." "We did," Valor agreed, "though I'm not sure how." "Stubbornness," Nyra said, "and maybe proof that the mate bond actually means something." Valor's breathing was ragged. The arrows. Still in his chest. Still killing him slowly. "I'm dying anyway." "Not if I can help it," Nyra said. She let power flow one final time. Not to harm, not to control, to heal. Every remaining reserve she possessed flooded into Valor's broken body. The energy burned through her system like fire through paper. Consumed her completely. Left nothing behind except exhaustion so absolute she couldn't feel her own heartbeat. But it worked. The arrows shifted, pushed out by tissue knitting itself back together, by organs regenerating, by a body choosing to live because its mate refused to let it die. The shafts fell to the ground. Blood stopped flowing. Breathing steadied. Valor's eyes cleared. You just killed yourself saving me. Probably, Nyra agreed. Her voice was fading, distant. But at least you'll survive to rebuild this empire properly. Not without you, Valor said. Don't you dare die after everything. Not planning on it, Nyra said. Just need to rest for a minute. She collapsed. Valor caught her, held her. The mate bond screamed, not with pain, with terror, because he could feel her slipping away, could feel her life force fading after she'd burned through everything to save him. No, he whispered. No, you don't get to die. Not after proving everyone wrong, not after showing them what real strength looks like. He looked up at the assembled armies, both sides watching, both sides waiting. Someone help her, he roared. She just saved us all. Someone help her. The old medic pushed through the crowd. Examined Nyra, face grim. She's burned out completely, used every reserve. Her body is shutting down. Then fix it, Valor demanded. I can't, the medic said. This isn't something medicine can heal. She needs rest, time, and luck. Valor pulled Nyra closer, felt the bond flickering, weakening. If she dies, I die. The mate bond doesn't survive the death of one partner. Then you'd better pray, the medic said. But Valor didn't pray. He did something else. He let his own wolf surface, let alpha power flood through him, not to dominate, not to control, to share, to give Nyra what she'd given him. Life, strength, the refusal to surrender. The bond flared. Brilliant, absolute, power flowing both directions, his strength becoming hers, her will becoming his. Two souls so tangled together that death couldn't separate them without killing both. And slowly, impossibly, Nyra's breathing steadied. Color returned to her face. Heartbeat strengthened. Her eyes opened. Silver meeting silver. Mate, recognizing mate. You're still here, she whispered. Always, Valor said. You saved me. Now I'm saving you. That's what mates do. Nyra smiled weakly. Took you long enough to figure that out. I'm a slow learner, Valor admitted, but I'm trying. Around them both armies knelt, not in surrender, in acknowledgement, that they'd just witnessed something that changed everything. That the Ghost Queen and the Alpha King had just proven the mate bond was real, that love could be stronger than power, that choosing to save instead of destroy was the truest strength, that an empire built on compassion instead of cruelty might actually survive. Chaz. 3 months later, Nyra stood in the rebuilt throne room, not as prisoner, as queen. The coronation had been quiet, intimate. Nothing like the spectacle when she'd first married Valor. No 1,000 nobles watching, no political maneuvering, just witnesses who'd chosen to rebuild instead of destroy. The old empire had fractured. Good. It needed to fracture, needed to break apart so something better could grow from the ruins. The new laws were simple. No more exile for political convenience. No more discarding people for failing to meet arbitrary standards of strength. No more treating the mate bond like weakness instead of the gift it was. Human-blooded Lycari were full citizens. Rogues could petition for reintegration. Power was measured by what you protected, not what you destroyed. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was. But it was better. And better was enough to start with. Valor entered the throne room, scars visible where the arrows had pierced him, reminders of the cost of choosing power over people. He would carry those scars forever. Physical proof that crowns bought with sacrifice eventually demanded payment. How does it feel? He asked. What? Being queen of an empire that doesn't hate you, Valor said. Nyra considered the question. Strange, uncomfortable, like wearing clothes that don't quite fit, but also right, like maybe destiny knew what it was doing when it bound us together. Valor took her hand. I'm sorry for everything, for rejecting you, for exiling you, for choosing the crown over my mate. I know, Nyra said. The bond doesn't let you lie. I feel your regret every day. Does it get easier? No, Nyra said honestly. But it gets survivable, and survivable is enough. They stood together in the throne room, two people who'd destroyed each other and somehow found their way back. Not to who they were. That was impossible. Too much had happened, too much pain, too much change, but to who they could become. That was the thing about survival. It changed you. Hardened parts that needed hardening, softened parts that needed softening. Taught you that strength wasn't the absence of weakness. It was choosing to stand up after weakness knocked you down. Outside, the city was rebuilding, slowly, painfully, one choice at a time. Kael had taken command of integrating rogues back into society, teaching them that strength could protect instead of just destroy, that survival didn't require becoming monsters. Theron had stepped down from leadership, chosen to serve instead of rule, proving that people could change if given the chance. The old council was dissolved, new advisors chosen from all bloodlines. Human, Lycari, mixed. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was competence, compassion, the willingness to build instead of tear down. It would take generations to undo the damage, to change minds, to prove that the new way worked. But it was happening. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One person deciding that maybe the Ghost Queen was right, that maybe strength came from compassion, that maybe the mate bond was the Empire's salvation instead of its weakness. Nyra looked at Valor. Do you think we'll survive this? What, the Empire? Us, Nyra clarified. The mate bond. The scars. The memories of what we did to each other. Valor was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe not. But I know we'll try. And trying is all anyone can do. Nyra nodded, squeezed his hand. The bond pulsed between them. Steady now. Healing. Not perfect, but real. And real was enough. Outside, snow began falling. Soft. Gentle. Nothing like the brutal storms of Frostfang. Nyra watched it through the window, remembering cold that killed, hunger that consumed, terror that broke people from the inside. Remembering the woman she'd been before exile, weak, desperate, begging for acceptance, and the woman she'd become after, strong, dangerous, absolutely done with apologizing for surviving. Both versions existed inside her now. The girl who believed in destiny, and the queen who learned that destiny was just the starting point. That real strength came from choosing who you became after fate made its move. That survival meant protecting the humanity that made you vulnerable instead of discarding it for power. Valor stood beside her, looking at the same snow, probably thinking similar thoughts about the king he'd been, cold, calculating, choosing power over everything, and the man he was trying to become. Someone who valued what he protected more than what he ruled. Someone who understood that crowns were worthless if everyone you loved was gone. Someone who learned that the mate bond wasn't weakness. It was the only thing strong enough to survive when everything else burned. Do you regret it? Valor asked quietly. Everything that happened? The exile? The pain? Becoming what you became? Nyra considered the question honestly. Yes. And no. I regret the suffering, the cold, the terror, the moments when I wanted to die. But I don't regret who I became. Don't regret learning that I was stronger than anyone believed, that survival could forge something unbreakable, even if it cost your humanity. I didn't lose my humanity, Nyra said. I just learned that humanity includes the capacity for violence, for hardness, for becoming the monster when necessary. The trick is choosing when it's necessary and when it's just easier. Valor nodded, understanding, because he'd learned the same lesson, that power without restraint was just destruction, that strength without compassion was just cruelty, that ruling required knowing when to be hard and when to be gentle, and that the mate bond was the compass that kept you honest. They stood together as snow fell across the Empire. Two people who'd destroyed each other, who'd rebuilt themselves from ashes and regret, who'd learned that love was stronger than power only if you chose to make it so. The throne room doors opened. A servant entered, bowing. Your Majesties, the evening council is assembled. Nyra straightened, squared her shoulders, became the queen the Empire needed, strong, decisive, absolutely certain of the path forward. We're coming, she said. Valor offered his arm. Nyra took it, and together they walked toward the council chamber, toward the work of rebuilding, toward the future they'd fought for. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs. Behind them, the throne sat empty. waiting for rulers who understood that crowns were responsibilities, not prizes. That power was a burden, not a right. That the mate bond was the reminder that even kings and queens were human, fallible, scarred, broken in places that never fully healed, but still standing, still fighting, still choosing compassion over cruelty even when cruelty was easier. That was the legacy of the Ghost Queen. Not that she survived exile, not that she conquered an empire, but that she proved humanity was stronger than power, that mercy was braver than revenge. The choosing to save instead of destroy was the truest strength. And years later, when storytellers gathered in taverns to share legends, they would tell her story. The rejected queen who rose from exile. The woman who faced down armies with nothing but power and will. The mate who chose to save her king instead of destroying him. The ruler who rebuilt an empire on compassion instead of cruelty. They would call her many things. The Ghost Queen. The Moonborn. The woman who proved that weakness was just strength waiting for the right moment. But Nyra would have preferred a simpler truth. She was just someone who refused to let rejection define her, who learned that survival meant more than staying alive, who discovered that real strength came from choosing humanity even when power would have been easier, who proved that the mate bond wasn't destiny's game, it was destiny's gift, and gifts were only valuable if you chose to protect them. The Empire would remember her story for generations, would tell it to children as lesson about courage and compassion, would use it to remind themselves that discarding people created monsters, and that monsters, once created, had every right to come back and demand acknowledgement. But for Nyra, the story was simpler. She survived. She changed. She built something better from the ruins of what destroyed her. And she learned that the mate bond, for all its pain and complication, was the one thing that made survival worth the cost. Because loving someone meant choosing them. Every day, every moment, even after they'd destroyed you. Especially after they'd destroyed you. That was what the mate bond really meant. Not that fate chose your partner, but that you kept choosing them anyway. Through pain, through betrayal, through everything that should have broken you apart. You kept choosing, and choosing was the only magic that mattered, the only power that lasted, the only strength that survived when everything else burned. Nyra walked into the council chamber, hand in hand with the man who'd rejected her, who she'd saved anyway, who she would keep saving. Not because the bond demanded it, but because she chose to. And choice in the end was everything. The Empire would survive or it wouldn't. The new laws would work or they wouldn't. The future was uncertain. But Nyra had learned something in Frostfang that no amount of power could teach. Uncertainty was just another word for alive, for still fighting, for refusing to let the story end on someone else's terms. And she was done letting anyone else write her ending. This was her story, her empire, her choice, and she would fight for it until her last breath, not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that choice, more than any power or crown or destiny, was what made her queen, not of an empire, but of herself. And that was the only throne that ever really mattered.